Rockville. Today is October 28th, 2024, and we'll begin meeting 26-24. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will start with our agenda review. Ms. Sarah Taylor Farrell.
Madam Mayor and council members, there are no changes to the agenda. However, the online version did have some issues with the attachments to certain agenda items, and they have been corrected. So you should be able to follow online with the public, and everything should be good.
Perfect. And if anyone is an early read, like many of us, that would be the budget survey and the two presentations were updated. Thank you. And now we'll move on to the city manager's report. Welcome, Mr. Mihalik.
Mayor Ashton, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Over the past couple of weeks, you've heard a number of comments from your appointed officials, the Board of Supervisors of Elections, and other interested parties about our elections code. One issue that we all agree upon unanimously is that we need to take a deep dive into our elections and our elections code. With that in mind, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be hiring a consultant to help us review our election processes and make suggestions on best practices that will likely lead to an update of our elections code. We look forward to working with Council, the Board of Supervisor Elections, and other interested parties on that very important update. The city's third food scraps compost drop-off site is now open. The new site is at the Twin Brook Recreation Center. Thanks to the Department of Public Works, the Environmental Management Team, and the Recreation Parks for hosting this popular city service at the Twin Brook Rec Center. Hopefully everyone's noticed the new vibrant colors around the city, and it's not just the leaves. The Lincoln Park Community Center, not even a giggle, nothing on that, no? Okay.
Good joke, good joke.
Okay, it's a dad joke, I know, but the Lincoln Park Community Center mural is underway. Kids in the Clubhouse After School program had the opportunity to take turns helping, so they're learning to become artists. More importantly, the participants were excited to learn that their contributions to the mural will be part of history in their community for a number of years to come. Also, I'd encourage folks to stop by the Beale Avenue in Town Center, where they can watch our grant-funded artists actively work on the Beale Asphalt Art Initiative. If you haven't been out there, it's really cool. It's a work in progress. We're going to have a celebration over the next couple weeks about that. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do want to thank the VisArts. I know they also received grant funding to support that work, MSAC. So I just wanted to acknowledge those partners, as well as to acknowledge Bloomberg for the work, the funding to support the asphalt project. And I know that there are conversations that you all are having among appointments about next steps regarding election code and other issues. So thank you for doing that and giving an update. Any questions from the body? Welcome, Mr. Menger.
I would just like to note, I know everyone on this dais is a big supporter of both the Rockville City Police Department, the Rockville Volunteer Fire Department, and prioritizing public safety. And just note that today is National First Responders Day. So I'd just like to note that for the record and note the appreciation that I know everyone here has for all those in our community and surrounding our community that put their lives on the line on a daily basis.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? I know there'll be some great trunk or treat events, and I appreciate also the city has several planned that we have had throughout the month, so thank you for that as well. We'll now move to boards and commissions, appointments and reappointments. We have quite a list today, and we'll have more coming November 18th, which is our next meeting. I want to thank all the folks who have stepped forward to volunteer, and if you have and you're still waiting, we will be reaching out, and we appreciate the volunteerism. With that, we're going to be making appointments to the Education Commission, the Human Rights Commission, Traffic and Transportation Commission, and the Youth Commission. Transportation and, oh, you know what? Actually spelled, it's written wrong here. Transportation and Mobility Commission. We did change that name. So let's start with the Education Commission. Would someone like to nominate? I know that Dr. Miles, you are the liaison for this commission. Do you want to volunteer for this?
I certainly can. I just have to find in the book. This is an updated book from agenda
Sure.
book from when I
It's Ms.
read it.
Chelsea Zhu, 2-year term until October 2026.
All right, so moved.
Do we have a second? Councilman Valeri seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. We'll do that one. All right, let's move to the Community Policing Advisory Board. Councilman Valeri?
Happy to. I move to approve a new appointment of John Walker to the Community Policing Advisory Board to serve an unexpired 3-year term until February 1st, 2026.
We have a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, we have another appointment for CPAB.
I move to approve a new appointment of Petra Patcher to the Community Policing Advisory Board to serve a 1-year term until October 1st, 2025.
Councilmember Shaw seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I do want to acknowledge that Petra Patra is our youth member who is joining. All right, now we'll move to the Human Rights Commission. Councilmember Shaw.
I move to approve a new appointment of Ann Long to the Human Rights Commission to serve an unexpired 3-year term until July 1st, 2025.
Councilmember Jackson seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. It passes unanimously. Do you
I
want
move
to do
to
the next one?
approve a new appointment of Sarajit Bhutani to the Human Rights Commission to serve an unexpired 3-year term until November 1st, 2025.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we have the Traffic and Mobility Commission. Councilmember Valeri.
Happy to. I move to approve the reappointment of Mark Plant and Judd Abunolo to the Transportation and Mobility Commission to serve a full 3-year term until October 1st, 2027.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Fulton seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right.
I move to approve the new appointment of Thomas Rogers to the Transportation and...
Lucy.
I'm sorry. I move to approve the new appointment of Thomas Rogers to the Transportation and Mobility Commission to serve a full 3-year term until October 1st, 2027.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Shaw seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Now we have several appointments to the Youth Commission. Councilor Miles, does your daughter want to make them? I'm joking. She raised her hand. We welcome youth participation. Councilmember Fulton.
I move to approve the new appointments of Sam Abateman, Jack Maravilla, Alex Macrianius, Layla McCarthy, Daniela Naiman, and Alicia Zhao to the Youth Commission to serve a 1-year term until October 1st, 2025.
Second.
Councilman Valeri seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much to all of our volunteers. We will just want to check with Ms. Taylor Farrell. Can you please have the team follow up with the volunteers to let them know that they have been appointed and then work with the staff liaisons to help get them trained up?
Will do.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now be moving on to community forum. All persons addressing the mayor and council shall speak in a civil and courteous manner. Please address the mayor and council, not staff, and be respectful of others. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes, and we ask that you stick to the 3 minutes allowed. There will be a time clock in front of you, and you'll be able to hear an audible beep at the end of your 3 minutes. Please state your name and if you live in Rockville for the record. The first person is Robert Kernick. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Robert Kernick. I'm chair of the Rockville Board of Supervisors of Elections, and I've lived in Rockville for 40 years. 4 weeks ago, I stood here with members of the BSE to call to your attention the fact that the city attorney had refused to enforce any of the citations issued to those who had violated Rockville's election laws in the 2023 election. You also heard from individual members of the BSE, from former Mayor Newton, and other individuals echoing that concern and asking you to direct the city attorney to enforce those citations. In response, you've done nothing. That is deeply disappointing, not only to those of us on the BSE, but to anyone who cares about the election process and believes in the rule of law. You cannot say that you believe in the rule of law while refusing to enforce the law. You can't say that you care about the election process while turning a blind eye to violations of your own election laws. And it is not enough to say, we'll hire a consultant, we'll amend the law, and we'll enforce it 3 years from now. Who is going to believe that you will enforce the law 3 years from now if you won't enforce it now? If you have election laws on the books that you won't enforce, you are just deceiving the voters. And speaking for myself, I don't want any part of that. The city code provides only one enforcement procedure for violations of Rockville's election law: the issuance and the enforcement of citations. That procedure may be imperfect. Most legal remedies are, but it is the only one available. Look, it is no secret that the rule of law and the democratic election process are under attack in the United States. This is a significant moment. It's a moment that calls for leaders who will enforce the law and protect the election process, even if doing that is difficult, and it is, or politically inconvenient. You don't want to look back at this moment and see that when tested, you failed, that you chose the path of least resistance, that you accepted excuses and did nothing. This is a moment you need to stand up. You need to do what's right. You need to insist on the enforcement of the
Thank you.
law. We're still waiting for you to do that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Welcome, Gabriela Villegas. Gabriela? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Madam Mayor and the Council Chambers. My name is Gabriela Villegas, and I am a Rockville constituent. And I'm here to express my strong support for addressing global poverty and to advocate for a deeper understanding of its impacts on local communities, including right here in Rockville. I would like to first acknowledge the incredible work of the Boren Project, a nonprofit that has been advocating for poverty reduction worldwide. The Boren Project focuses on advancing U.S. foreign policy to address global poverty through strategies such as international aid, economic development, and humanitarian assistance. The interconnectedness between global and local economies means that when we invest in reducing global poverty, we reap significant benefits at home. However, while we advocate for global poverty reduction, it is important not to lose sight of the challenges that exist here in Rockville. Poverty issues are not confined to distant countries. Here in our community, many families struggle with housing insecurity, and many homeless people are found on the streets of the center of the Rockville Town Center. Addressing these issues should be a priority alongside our efforts to support global poverty alleviation. This leads me to a few key questions for you, our city leaders. What current programs are in place to support Rockville's low-income residents, particularly in terms of affordable housing, food security, and job creation? What steps are being taken to collaborate with local nonprofits and businesses to create sustainable long-term solutions to poverty here in Rockville? And finally, how can we as a city amplify our efforts to raise awareness about both local and global poverty, ensuring our residents understand the value of contributing to a broader humanitarian cause? I urge the City Council and the Mayor's Office to continue exploring ways to address poverty at every level and to consider how we are, as a community, can support efforts like those led by the Boren Project. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing more about the city's ongoing work in this vital area.
Thank you. Next, we have Ben Davis. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Ben Davis. I live on Forest Avenue, right next to Welsh Park, and I am here to speak about my concerns about Welsh Park after the shooting incident this weekend. I walk my dog in the park. My grandparents walk to school through the park. All my friends and neighbors are in the park all the time. It's a wonderful place. It's a great asset to this community, but we really were pretty shaken by this. And have great confidence in, the police investigation. I'm sure they're doing everything they can to follow up on it. But looking forward and looking to the interests of the community, it did seem to me that it would be worth giving some consideration to installing security cameras in the park. And I think it would also probably be important to look at having officers present or having some presence, especially on those weekend mornings when the athletic fields are being used. It's great to see people from all over the community there, but when there are a lot of people out, this could have really been a terrible tragedy. We could have lost 13 kids, and so we had a narrow escape. But I don't think we can just sit back and say, well, let that go. So that's really my concern that I wanted to share with you. And I think all my neighbors, I'm sure, would be happy to do anything we can to to follow up on this, and I certainly would as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, welcome Tyree Davis.
Good evening, everybody, and it's Tyree Davis IV. I hope everyone is well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here to discuss the importance of creating, implementing, and upholding a clear conflict of interest policy and a code of conduct for the mayor and council. This isn't simply about rules on paper. It's about trust, transparency, and ensuring that our community leaders can serve the community with the highest ethical standards. First, let's talk about conflict of interest. Conflict of interest occurs when personal interests, whether financial, familial, or personal, could interfere with the decision-making duties entrusted to public officials. As we get into budget season, I want to point out an example. The spouse of a member of your body sits on a board of an organization that received over $200,000 in total from the city last year, and it was never publicly disclosed nor discussed. This organization does do great work, but we, the public, should have known. This example is an inherent conflict of interest, and a conflict can damage public trust and undermine the integrity of council's decisions. Our community expects that each of you will make decisions that put our collective interests first, not your own. Clear guidelines help avoid potential conflicts and set a standard for ethical behavior, helping you as leaders to remain impartial and focused on the public good. This brings us to the importance of a formal code of conduct. A code of conduct provides a structured, consistent set of expectations for all members of council, not only regarding conflict of interest, but also in terms of behavior, communication, and accountability. It offers transparency to the public who can trust that you are working by a clearly defined framework. This clarity fosters trust and assures community members that their representatives will act with integrity, transparency, and decorum. The mayor starts community forum with saying we as community should be civil and courteous, to which I agree, but that is not always reciprocated to community from the elected. To be ill-mannered to the hardworking staff, disregarding of what community is saying, and being combative out loud or through body language to each other isn't appropriate. We can't hold you all accountable if you haven't decided the baseline for yourselves. Other cities have successfully implemented codes of conduct that reinforce ethical standards and empower officials to handle sensitive situations confidently. These standards guide not only the choices you make as individual leaders, but also the culture of the council as a whole, and thus the city. When our leaders are bound by a shared commitment to integrity, the entire community benefits from governance that is principled, equitable, and trustworthy. In short, Establishing clear conflict of interest guidelines and a robust code of conduct isn't just a procedural matter, it's a commitment to ensuring that our community's leadership remains ethical, transparent, and accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, welcome John Becker.
Excuse me for a minute while I get set up. I'll make it quick. My name is John Becker. I live at 148 Monroe Street, which is across the street from the Rockville Metro Station. I'm here tonight once again to ask for a town hall meeting of mayor and council, department heads, police, chief of police, and more guard and ready and other electeds from our Montgomery County to set up a town hall meeting for the residents of Town Center, as there are a lot of things going on or not going on or mis and disinformation. And it's important to do that. Number two, I support the Board of Supervisors of Elections and their efforts. And I want to caution everybody on dis and misinformation as it applies to council members and staff. And my comment on this is the law is the law. And we need to enforce, not implement, but enforce the law. What's important here is it's city. City before party, city before friendships, acquaintances. It's the city. Now, that is not happening in the rest of the country, but it should happen in the city of Rockville. David, I have a comment that's not picking on you, but I want to bring up something that you mentioned at the retreat in August, that when the city manager asked, why all of you ran for office, you said, and I'm quoting you in a complimentary way, is that because you weren't getting any response from mayor and council and staff of the city at a specific time in the past. Now you know how I feel. I have one compliment here tonight, Mayor, for you. A couple weeks ago, we did a walk around at Lincoln Park, and I saw you grab a grocery cart that was abandoned at the side of the street, and you moved it around to a certain location. I assume you contacted somebody to get it removed, and everybody else walked right by it, but you did the right thing. And that's one of the things I appreciate. Thank you very much.
That concludes public community forums members who have signed up in advance. I will ask if anyone else from the floor wants to speak. I will also note there'll be other opportunities to speak during our public hearing regarding our budget public hearing, as well as our town center master plan during those times. Is there anyone else who would like to speak more generally during community forum? Okay. Thank you very much. We now will be moving on to the consent agenda. Agenda 9A, ratify and approve the city manager's early execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management to fund construction of the Emergency Operations Center at 6th Staff Court, authorizing the city manager to enter into electricity supply agreements. 9C, authorization for the city manager to execute a grant agreement with the Maryland Energy Administration for the FY 2024 Street Light and Outdoor Lighting Efficiency Program grants. Agenda item 9D, award and authorize the city manager or designee to execute a contract in the form of a purchase order to Duran Incorporated of Owings Mills, an installation of office furniture at 6th Half Court in the amount of $429,000 plus, consistent with the terms and conditions of Howard County, Maryland contract issued after invitation for bid 2015-42. And 9E, award and authorize the city manager to execute a contract responsive to IFB 25-24 for the construction of 6th Half Court emergency generator installation project to Synergy Electric Co. of Crofton, Maryland, not to exceed $680,000 plus. Does anyone want to ask any questions about these consent agenda items or approve them all at once? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve 9A through E? Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve consent items A, B, C, D, and E as presented this evening.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Shaw. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All right. It is unanimous. We'll now move to the budget public hearing for FY 2026. I want to ask our city clerk to ensure that this meeting has been properly noticed.
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members, it was advertised in the Washington Post on October the 10th and the 17th, and also on our city's website.
Thank you. And I also know there was an extra push in Rockville Reports emails that are going out on Sundays. All right, so we will welcome folks to participate and join our public hearing. Just a few quick notes. All persons addressing the mayor and council shall speak in a civil and courteous manner. And Madam Members of the audience, please continue to be respectful of others. Individuals will have 3 minutes to speak. An organization or group affiliated with the city will have 5 minutes to speak. We ask that you stick to the time allowed. Again, there's a time clock in front of you. Please state your name and if you live in the city of Rockville for the record. The first person who has signed up is Jake Jacobek. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jake Jacobek. I live at 319 Grandin Avenue, Croydon Park, and I'm the chair of the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee. I would like to first note that we had our first Rockville Bike Party on Saturday, and we had about 50 people come. It was very well attended. We had a number of kids, families came out. We're already planning our next one, and I'll make sure to keep you updated as that comes along. Tonight, I would like to speak on matters that concern the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee with respect to the budget. We would like to commend City Council for its efforts to make Rockville a safer cycling city. I see people riding their bikes down my street all the time. I see people, transportation riding, people in kit, all kinds of things, and the efforts are bearing fruit. And I would like all of us to work together to maintain that momentum. We have three main details we would like to advocate for in this budget cycle. We're going to come up with more specific elements of these details. I just wanted to come here and introduce the idea tonight. The first thing we would like to do is to support the continued expansion of Capital Bike Share. As you know, bike share is very useful to people in the city. I use it pretty regularly. I actually couldn't find a bike at my station today when I was walking here. However, there is more density in the city. There are places where bicycles are very, very handy in the specific locations, and it would be useful for the City Council to continue to work to do that. I understand we've gotten a grant for Twinbrook. I would like to see it go further. Secondly, we would like the City Council to continue to fund feasibility studies for complete streets projects like the ones we've seen built in the city lately. As we have all seen, Maryland Avenue and Town Center were built. Those began the feasibility studies. That's what helped us get the grants and the money and everything else together to actually make these things happen. So once again, I will provide specifics in a letter, and we will continue this conversation as the continuum goes along. And the final thing that the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee would like to advocate for on this cycle is to definitely keep considering youth cycling education in our schools, whichever way that would be done, whether through outside organizations or training our staff, whichever that happens to be. That is one thing that the League of American Bicyclists has said that the Rockville made Rockville look better in the ratings, and we've seen success from those kinds of efforts in neighboring jurisdictions. We would hope that we would get this started here in Rockville. And that summarizes the points that I had from the committee tonight. I look forward to continuing this discussion as we iron out the details for the FY 2026 budget. And I thank you for your time tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next, welcome Mary Van Balgoy. And you're representing TCA, correct? Thank you. She'll have 5 minutes.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Mary Van Balgoy, and I am president of the Twinbrook Community Association. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the Rockville fiscal year 2026 budget on behalf of the Twinbrook neighborhood. Throughout the year, TCA has engaged neighbors through meetings, monthly walks and talks, and our annual picnic to discuss community priorities. Based on their feedback and our executive committee's discussions, we respectfully request that the following points be added to the record. First, the construction of a pedestrian and bicycle bridge spanning the railroad tracks in Twinbrook remains our community's highest priority. We are pleased to see that the city received a federal grant to evaluate and design a crossing over the Metro Rail and CSX railroad tracks, which would connect Twinbrook to Rockville Pike and vice versa. While this grant is an important step forward, we know much remains to be done before the bridge becomes a reality. We strongly encourage the city to maintain this project as a top priority in the coming years. Regarding pedestrian safety, we commend the city's commitment to the Safe Routes to School initiative, which aims to enhance safety at critical intersections in Twinbrook. This initiative is essential for our residents, particularly children who will benefit from these improvements. We fully support the current plans and have suggested additional enhancements which are on record. At this stage, we urge the city to allocate funding in the budget to cover feasible improvements identified in the Safe Routes to School analysis. Additionally, TCA submitted 2 budget requests through a community engagement process, and we would like to comment on each of these. Neighborhood welcome signs. Twinbrook currently lacks welcome signs despite our requests in previous budgets, including fiscal year 2023. We strongly encourage the city to prioritize this signage initiative, which aligns with the adopted comprehensive plan. Placemaking through neighborhood welcome signs enhances community identity and builds a sense of belonging. These signs not only foster neighborhood pride, but also create a positive impression for visitors and potential residents, signaling that Twinbrook is a well-maintained, welcoming community. Splash pad. TCA advocates for the addition of a splash pad to our community's recreational offerings. A splash pad offers a zero-entry design suitable for all ages and abilities, from young children to seniors and individuals with disabilities, providing an inclusive and safe way to cool off in the summer. Importantly, a splash pad is free to access, ensuring that all residents can enjoy it without financial barriers, and it addresses climate adaptation needs by offering a water-based recreational activity suited to warmer weather. In closing, we are grateful for your consideration of these priorities, which we believe will greatly benefit the Twinbrook community. Thank you for your dedication to improving the quality of life in our neighborhoods.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome, Margaret Magner. And I believe you'll be representing West End Civic Association. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Margaret Magner. I'm president of the West End Civic Association, and we submitted a project proposal for the FY26 budget on deer population management. This was requested by many residents at our September neighborhood meeting most recently, but frequently at the open forum of pretty much all of our monthly neighborhood meetings. We request that humane deer population management be included in the FY26 budget of the city. The deer are growing in unprecedented numbers, and according to Rockville Animal Control, the problem affects every area within the city, including town center. Rockville's white-tailed deer management plan from 2012, say that 3 times fast too, identifies the primary concerns of public safety and health. Safety concerns include deer vehicle collisions and Lyme disease, and although the deer are not the only carriers of the black-legged tick that is the source of the disease, the close proximity in Rockville of large numbers of deer to humans, where they no longer fear people and come close to homes, increases the public health concern for many residents. Ecological and biological impacts, as well as negative impacts to residential landscaping, are other concerns highlighted in that report. And in the 14 years since that plan was written, the deer population has grown even denser. Residents are concerned about feeling that they need to request exceptions for 6 to 10 foot high fences, or the bird netting to extend their 4 foot high fences. We don't want Rockville to become a city of fences, and we propose humane deer population management. We know that finding a good solution, an effective and humane solution, is difficult, and there aren't a lot of models to work from. And so we suggest consulting PETA, which was also a consultant to that 2012 city plan, who can potentially help to determine the best humane approach. So, I want to specifically mention, I was asked to specifically mention that the residents from the Rose Hill Great Falls Road residential area are seeing a particular huge increase in the deer population. They had a neighborhood conflict tonight, but they asked to mention that the deer have found food along the residential streets and front yards with acorns and leaves from street trees. So perhaps some thought could also be given to street trees that are used and whether they're favorites of the deer. They feel that they need representation but couldn't be here tonight. So they propose, and we support, a deer-focused meeting in their residential area or courts in the near future, or a focused full public meeting in the future, or a problem-solving committee authorized to initiate solutions. It's critical that Rockville fund and manage some initiative in the near term to humanely reduce the growing deer population. It's out of control, and the population will continue to increase significantly and has become a public safety issue, not just in our neighborhood, but across the city. Thank you for your service to the neighborhoods and Rockville.
Thank you. That exhausts the list of those who signed up in advance for the budget hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Welcome. Please state your name and whether you live in the city of Rockville.
Yes, hi. My name is Sheila. I live in the city of Rockville in King Farm. I live there since 2003, and I know that, well, I would like to make just some comments regarding the farmstead and the way that it could be used. Some of my neighbors were discussing, and it would be nice to have a swimming pool that could be indoor, as well as a hot tub for the community to enjoy. I think gym is very necessary. We have currently only 3 machines in our community in King Farm, so we would like to see something enlarged, something that people can use, more machines there. I think that also a social place where people can gather and get to know our neighbors. Because we all talk during the Facebook, inside the Facebook, but we really don't know each other. And so I think it will be nice to have a social area to stay in touch with our community. I think that's pretty much it, but thank you so much for allowing me to talk.
Thank you for your testimony.
Sure.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak as part of the budget hearing? Okay. I'll just wanted to turn it to staff as well to open up and share just what are our next steps and then when the next budget hearings will be.
Yes, so the next budget hearings will be scheduled for after the proposed budget is presented in March of 2025. Other than that, I would like to put in a plug for the budget survey, which if there are any members of the public who have not taken the survey yet, you can find the link at www.rockvillemd.gov/budget. We've actually received, as of today, just shy of 300 responses, which is well over double what we had received this time last year. So all of the hard work everyone's been putting in to get the word out has been really helping. The interim report of those results as of October 15th, not including all 300, is included in the agenda packet today, starting on page 268. And the other materials in the packet include the summary of public testimony and the exhibits of the Propose a Project submissions from community groups and individuals, which have also been shared with department staff to review as part of the budget process. Other than that, the next public hearings will be after the presentation of the proposed budget.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I'll just note that there are flyers like this around the city and community centers at City Hall. You can come and just scan the QR code. It is in multiple languages, so we hope that you'll take a few minutes. We'd like to make sure the entire city is represented. We're trying to look at across the city, where we're hearing more and where we're not hearing. So it's really important that all generations, all parts of the city contribute and share your ideas. I know, speaking for my colleagues, I know we all read it very carefully, and I also want to thank everyone who submitted the community project as well. They were very thoughtful. Okay. All right, thank you very, very much. We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Chambers, again, and Ms. Francesco. We'll next transition to our next public hearing. And I know there's a presentation for this one. We'll start with the presentation, and then I will open up for community forum. I do want to ask Ms. Taylor Farrell if this has been properly noticed.
Yes, Madam Mayor, it has been properly noticed in Washington Post on October the 10th and the 17th, and on our city's website.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Katie Gerbis.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's nice to be here tonight. We have a brief presentation to you all about the draft Town Center Master Plan that you're going to hear a public hearing on today. Before we get started, I do want to take a few seconds just to introduce the gentleman over here to my right. This is Mr. Andrew Reidelbach. He is a principal planner in our comprehensive planning division. He is a new employee to the city. He started just after Memorial Day. So all summer, he's been getting caught up to speed on all things that our division has going on. He's been an integral part of our town center team, and this is his first time attending a mayor and council hearing. So he's new to you. You are all relatively new to him. He's going to kind of listen in, take some notes, answer some questions tonight with the hopes that at future meetings he'll be able to give this presentation himself. With that, we'll begin. So we're here tonight to talk about Town Center. The map that you see on the right side of your page shows the geography when we say Town Center. This is the area that we're talking about. This is the same boundaries as the Planning Area 1 chapter outlined in the Rockville 2040 Comprehensive Plan. We have not changed those boundaries from that comp plan. In total, the town square area is 0.4 square miles, so it's really quite a small but dense pocket of Rockville's neighborhoods. Here's our project timeline. Many of you have seen different iterations of this slide in the past. We've simply moved our red box for what phase we're in along. This is the first of several meetings where we will bring this plan before you for review, discussion, with the hope that we will have adoption of the plan in January 2025 after the new year comes. There are a few procedural requirements I think are important to note just so you all are aware. This is proposed to be an amendment to the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Because it's an amendment to a comp plan, the state of Maryland in the land use article lists certain requirements of processes and timelines that have to be adhered to per state law. One of those is we're required to have a public hearing before the Planning Commission. That hearing has some noticing requirements. That all has been satisfied. That public hearing took place on July 10th of this summer. The other procedural element you should be aware of is the land use article sets forth a 90-day time frame from when the plan is transmitted to you all. That date of transmission was October 18th, the date you received this packet that included this plan in it. There is a 90-day time frame by which you all have to make a decision on this plan. Otherwise, the Planning Commission approved draft is considered adopted. There is the option for a one-time 60-day extension. If we need to exercise that extension, we'll have to pass a resolution. When we get to the slide showing the timeline, we'll talk about that time frame. Right now, we are scheduled to be within that 90-day window, so we shouldn't have any issues. But should something need to slip, should we need to add something in, that is a time frame that you all should be aware of that we need to adhere to. As far as community engagement is involved, we've had very robust engagement throughout the entire duration of this process. Many of you have participated in several of these meetings, whether in your role as an elected official or several of you before you became elected officials attended many of these meetings. Our outreach and engagement period lasted from April through September of last year. In that process, we had approximately 50 public meetings. We met with hundreds, probably nearly 1,000 individuals to learn what works well in Town Center, what doesn't work well, what are our goals and visions for the future. All of that is summarized in the community engagement report that was published in October of 2023, so just about a year ago from now. That's still online. You can look that up on the Engage Rockville website. That community engagement report is also an appendix to this draft plan. So it is, I believe it's in your packet, and it will be an attachment to the draft. Since we released the draft, we've also continued with that community engagement effort. The first draft of the plan was published in late April of 2024. At the same time that we published that on Engage Rockville on the city's website, we also posted a feedback survey on Engage Rockville. So that's an opportunity for members of the community to tell us what they think about the plan, what are the most important parts, what is it missing, what would you like to change, what is really important we can keep, things of that nature. I looked this up right before I came upstairs. We are at 31 responses on Engage Rockville right now of folks who have completed that survey. All of those surveys that were completed as of the date of your packet are included in the staff report. I want to say it's attachment C. In June of this year, we held 2 public meetings to discuss the draft plan. We presented the recommendations, the goals, the policies within it, and provided an opportunity for the community to give comment and ask questions. We had about 40 individuals attend those meetings. Over the summer, we presented to 5 different city commissions and committees, and we had 5 meetings before the Planning Commission that went from June and ended in September when they approved their draft of the plan. Throughout all of this, we've been using our pretty standard outreach and communication tools, social media, Rockville reports, both the online digital version and the printed version, Engage Rockville, sending out blasts to subscribers through that project, all the things we can think of to make sure folks know this is a draft that's out there. We want you to read it. We want you to provide feedback, and here are your opportunities to do so. Going a little bit into how the document itself is set up, it's rather large, so I think this is important to orient you and any folks in person or listening at home on how the document is established. We have several sections that talk about background, so our vision, what's the process, the history of Town Center, the demographics of the community, things of that nature are in that background section. We also have 8 different thematic chapters. All of the goals, policies, and actions are buried within those thematic chapters. So things like zoning, transportation, housing, economic development, those are those chapters. And then last but certainly not least, we have an implementation section, which talks about how do we create this document and make it living. We don't want it just to be words on a page. We actually want to implement the recommendations that are within there. That implementation chapter provides some guidance and recommendations on how to do so. Earlier, I mentioned goals, policies, and actions. So the goals are kind of those broad overarching targets. We then have several policies, 1 or more policies that are a bit more specific. They provide more actionable steps of how we can achieve those overarching goals. And then our actions, those are those tiny discrete steps. Those are the actual tangible things that we need to do in order to realize those policies and ultimately those goals. The draft before you tonight has 12 goals, 20 policies, and 61 recommended actions. Going to implementation, this is small text. You're not supposed to be able to read every word on here. It's just to kind of illustrate the implementation matrix that's included as the final chapter to this document. That matrix has every single recommended action within the plan, and it establishes for each a time frame by which that should be implemented. It identifies who is the lead implementing responsibility. Most times that's a city department or even a division within a city department, but there's some items on here that we need to rely on our partners at the county, at the state to implement, so that's identified. We also identified the implementation vehicle. How are we going to do this? Is this a capital improvement that we need to budget for? Is there a legislative action that needs to take place? Maybe we need to do a study or some more research in order to implement something. We've identified implementation vehicles for every action within that plan, and that's how we're hoping to take it from being a static document that sits on a shelf to something that's living and actually making a difference in our community. Now we're going to go into specifically what is actually in the document itself. So the vision for Town Center as established in the draft before you tonight is that Rockville Town Center will continue to grow as a vibrant, multicultural, diverse, and inclusive community that celebrates a high quality of life and place. A neighborhood at its core, Town Center will be a hub within the region for sustainable, walkable, transit-oriented living. To achieve this vision, the master plan will create a flexible regulatory environment, encourage the development of additional housing units, promote higher density development, all of which will strengthen the local economy and bring this vision to life. For the sake of time, we're not going to go through all 61 actions. They are available in Attachment A, which is the draft plan itself. The staff report lists all of the goals and all of the policies that feed the goals. But for the sake of time, we'll just quickly go through those 12 goals that are established in the plan. The first is to target areas for higher density development with a specific goal of reaching 2,000 new residential units within town center. Goal number 2 is to amend parking requirements to be reflective of the transit-oriented neighborhood that town center is. We're close to Metro, BRT is coming, we have plenty bus stops currently here. How do our parking requirements need to change as a result of that? We want to create pedestrian-oriented building and site design standards. So when we have this new development coming in, how can we make sure that we're holding that development to a certain design standard, a design minimum? We want to make sure we're creating wide sidewalks, that we're creating environments that people can walk and gather and roll and do all of those things that we want them to be able to do in this community. Making transportation-related improvements to enhance safety and user experience. Some of those talk about roadways themselves for vehicles. Other of those actions talk about how do we make those areas safer for pedestrians, for cyclists, for those who roll, et cetera. There's a goal to work with our partners at WMATA and Montgomery County Department of Transportation to enhance the bus system. Some of the policies here talk specifically about bus rapid transit. Others talk about the existing network of buses that exist. We want to implement a wayfinding signage regime, not only to bring people into town center from some of our main thoroughfares like 355 and 28, but once you're in there, how can you get around? How do you know about all of the amenities that exist within town center, and how do you know the best way to get there and an accessible way to get there? We would like to strengthen visual and physical connections between town center and its surrounding neighborhoods, increase the number of affordable homes, cultivate town center to be an exciting and innovative place that's welcoming to all. Document and retain town center's history. Activate our existing retail spaces while also bringing in new retailers and businesses. And then encourage sustainable and resilient building practices to recover from climate change impact. Also included within this draft plan is the Rockville Metro Station concept that you all as a body endorsed, I believe it was in May of this year. So you've seen this image. This is what was presented to you before. It's in this document as well. This document kind of divides town center into a few different quadrants and then has some specific visions. So we do bring forward this Metro Station concept as the vision for this area. As you all know, because you discussed it last spring, it's important to note that this concept is still very much a concept. We don't have a development plan in front of us. A joint development solicitation has not yet been released by WMATA to find a partner to develop this land. So really the town center master plan is encouraging that we want to redevelop those parking lots, those surface parking lots. We can provide structure parking, but we can also bring much needed housing units right on top of Metro, and that's brought forth in this plan. So all summer long, the Planning Commission has been reviewing this draft plan and making modifications and edits as they see fit. Ultimately, September 25th, they approved a draft plan. That's the plan that's in your packet and that we're here to discuss today. There were several changes that were made between that Planning Commission approved draft and the draft that was initially released to the community in April. I would say the vast majority, upwards of 75, 80% of those changes are very, very small. I would classify them as clerical edits, typos that we found, fixing commas, making sure formatting is proper. But there are several major changes that's important to bring up to you and members of the community to make sure you're aware of. The first of that is we added an adequate public facilities chapter. The draft that was released in April did not have a chapter. It had a chapter that was focused on water and sewer specifically, but it didn't go into transportation and it didn't go into our school system. So there is a new chapter that has been added in there. Lots of folks provided comments saying, hey, we need to talk about that. So that chapter is in there. And in that chapter, we ran the 2,000 unit goal that we have of 2,000 new residential units through all of our capacity tests to see if there's adequacy in all of those systems. And that analysis found that there is capacity in transportation, in water, in sewer, and in our schools for the targeted growth goal we have here in the plan. As a result, this plan does not propose any exemptions or changes to that adequate public facilities ordinance. We think as it is right now is sufficient for the type of development we want to see here in Town Center. Another change that you'll see in the September draft versus the April draft is the area that's proposed for the elimination of parking minimum requirements has changed. Montgomery County has established a law where within 1/2 mile of a metro station or within 1/4 mile of a bus rapid transit station, they have eliminated all parking minimums. The April draft of the plan proposed mimicking that regime here in Rockville, so 1/2 mile from metro, 1/4 mile from the BRT stations. The Planning Commission has reviewed and they expanded that area to eliminate parking minimums from the entire planning area. In our work session, when we come back in December, we'll have some maps that show you the difference between those areas. It's 3 or 4 blocks is really the area that's impacted by that change. When we talk about the elimination of parking minimum requirements, it's important to note that that does not necessarily mean no parking will be built, but it means we are not forcing and mandating an arguably arbitrary amount of parking to be built. The market will decide. In many cases, we're seeing in elsewhere in Montgomery County and in the region, we're still having parking developed in suburban Maryland and in suburban Virginia. It just might not be the same amount of parking as is currently required by code. The Planning Commission approved draft also created a third character area that this document has called the transition area. The draft that was in April had 2 character areas, one called the core and one called the edge. We've now introduced a third transition area. My next slide has a map and we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then the other change that you'll notice between the April and September drafts is an expansion to the bonus height program. So the April draft proposed bonus height being available if additional MPDUs were included, moderately priced dwelling units were included in a residential development. The Planning Commission's draft has expanded that, so additional MPDUs and or additional green space that has been improved with climate resiliency features would also qualify for a bonus height program. Again, on the next slide, I have a chart that shows that difference here. So if we look at the map that's on the screen, the area that you see in purple, that is the core character area. The boundaries of the core have not changed between the April and September drafts. The heights proposed have not changed. So both drafts have the height at 200 feet for properties within the core and a maximum bonus height of 50 feet. Again, that has been consistent throughout the entire process. When we look at the edge character area, that's kind of the lighter pink color that you can see along North Washington Street and then around Richard Montgomery High School. The height there is proposed as 75 feet. That is consistent. That has not changed between both drafts. And then the bonus height maximum is 25 feet. That has changed. The April draft had 20 feet as the maximum bonus height. This current draft has 25 feet as the maximum bonus height. So that's the only change in those edge, the lighter pink color. In the darker pink that you can see the blue kind of hashed rectangle surrounding, that is this new transition area that was added by the Planning Commission. In that area, the height is 75 feet. Previously, before there was this third area, that was edge, which is also 75 feet. So the by right height for that area has not changed between April and September. What has changed is the bonus height is proposed as 50 feet in that area. That was previously 20 feet, which was what the edge was in all of the April draft. So that's kind of the best way we can describe all of those changes. It's written out in the document. It's a little bit word vomity, admittedly, but hopefully this chart can show you what has changed. The 2 things that are underlined here is the 50 feet bonus height in the transition is something new, and then the 25 feet for the edge as bonus height, that's the other thing that has changed here. So moving on, staff's recommendation is that the mayor and council do indeed hold a public hearing this evening to hear the community's thoughts on this plan. Assuming that we do hold that hearing tonight, our next steps are outlined on this slide. We are scheduled to come back to you all in December 9th for a work session. Staff have some specific points that we would like to bring up to you all to ensure we are all on the same page. We also have some suggestions and modifications that we're going to bring to you all as a body. And then we are currently scheduled for adoption of the plan on January 13th. If we stick to this schedule, we are within that 90-day window. I think we're at like 86, 85. We're cutting it close, but we are within that period of time. If for whatever reason the schedule needs to shift, we'll be in communication with the city manager and with the city attorney, and we might need to add a resolution here granting that 160-day extension. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much. I know we're in listen mode to staff and to the community at this time, and so I just wanted to note to the public that the mayor and council will be taking on this agenda item on December 9th after we received all the community feedback that we'll have for review, and we'll have a work session that will be public. I also wanted to note that Engage Rockville is still live, and we are encouraging comments, and we'd love to see more responses. With that, welcome to our public hearing on the Town Center Master Plan. Individuals will have 3 minutes to speak, organizations 5 minutes. We ask that you stick to the time allowed and be courteous. There's a time clock in front of you. You will hear an audible beep at the end of your time. Please, before you begin, state your name and if you live in the city of Rockville. With that, we do have some folks who are signed up in advance, and then we'll move to anyone else who would like to speak. The first person is Rick Reinhardt. Welcome.
Mayor, Council, Rick Reinhardt, 38 Maryland Avenue, Unit 501. You've got me the day between two 15-hour shifts for the Montgomery County Board of Elections, so I may not be at the top of my game. The Town Center Master Plan avoids addressing what should be the #1 priority for Town Center. That is, how to convert empty office buildings adjacent to the Rockville Metro Station into market rate and affordable residences. The Town Center currently has 4 of them anyway. Our post-COVID economy really requires city government to be in an entrepreneurial mindset, figuring out what needs doing and getting it done, not sitting back and waiting to receive developers' plans, if they ever in fact materialize. I've heard the argument that Rockville Town Center should keep the empty office buildings as inventory in case office users suddenly wish to move to Rockville Town Center. But the recent history is just the opposite has been happening. The city has lost 1, its largest, and 2, its most high-profile private sector employers, Westat moving to Bethesda, Choice Hotels moving to North Bethesda. For whatever reasons, and it would be good for the council and the administration to learn what they are, major private sector employers are leaving our city, not migrating towards it. But that's not the case with housing. 3 things I'd suggest that we do. 1, learn what other municipalities across the country are doing to help create office to residential development. 2, figure out incentives to turn each of these properties into residences with a percentage of units being workforce, affordable, low income, or special needs. There could be financial incentives, tax breaks, or expedited approvals. 3, collaborate with the county, the state, and the feds to help create these incentives. All have shown a willingness to go the extra mile to help create housing, especially affordable. The Rockville Town Center Master Plan discusses at some length, as we've heard, placemaking, walkability, bikeability, public art, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all concepts I really, really support. But the part of the master plan that deals with development, investment, and tax base is noticeably lacking, as is good data on Rockville Town Center. I presented an hour-and-a-half session last week at the joint annual conference of the American Planning Association of Maryland and the Maryland Planning Commissioners Association. A colleague made an interesting observation that planning, economic development, and housing all seem to be in silos. It's up to this council and the administration to make sure that they work together. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next, welcome Robert D. Dunham. Welcome.
Mayor and Council, thank you for letting me be here tonight. My name is Robert Dunham. I have lived on Anderson Avenue for 36 years. I am very concerned about the last stage of the development of this plan. Staff did an excellent job of communicating from April through September. The plan as formulated as a document is a great piece of project planning. I'm a pro in that field. I compliment them on it. What concerns me is that the change to the parking regulations and the change to the building regulations were effectively a bait and switch. All of us who attended hearings throughout the summer expected that what we were looking at would be reasonably close to the final. Instead, we now have a situation where the no parking rules have been expanded. The likelihood is if that doesn't work out, it will fall onto the West End where I live. We have a maximum building height that, if my math is right, works now to 14 stories, approximately 3 times the height of the existing town center apartment buildings. That is a radical change right on the edge of our neighborhood. We have not had time to adequately consider this, to put our comments together, to communicate them to you and to staff. I ask that the plan be rescinded back to staff to redo the hearing process, because this change is so substantial that it requires the community again be able to review the plan in full. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, John Becker.
Good evening. My name is John Becker. I live at 148 Monroe Street, which is across the street from the Rockville Metro Station. Somebody slipped this underneath my door tonight. Just want everybody to see that. Apparently this has something to do with town center. I do not know for sure, but we'll find out later. Part of the plan I approve, and I'm going to heartily support, is the sidewalk widths in Rockville Pike, Beers Mill Road, and East Jefferson Street, Route 28. This is a dangerous situation where cars and trucks are literally feet from people walking. It's not safe. It creates the wrong environment. It is not conducive to a safe walkability situation. And I'll be harping on this as we go forward on this process. Secondly, I asked for, as it repeatedly over this past month, speed cameras on these streets are essential because of the speeding on East Jefferson Street, Rockville Pike, and Veers Mill Road. I understand tomorrow night there's supposed to be some sort of a meeting, a virtual meeting on Route 255, and yet there was a problem with the login information or something like that. So I would like somebody to say, is this meeting going to take place? Because the logon information was probably incorrect. And the final thing I'd like to say is, in this plan, it says that Americana Center condominium, the current zone is residential multi, and yet the new plan calls for it to be OCRM, office, commercial, residential, multi-mix. Americana Center is a historic property, and we're probably going to try to obtain national designation and to be zoned an office, commercial center, while Sunrise Senior Living across the street is residential multi. Something ain't right about that. So we're going to go through the process here and contacting whoever needs to be contacted on staff and you guys and gals, just to be sure that you understand Americana Center is a residential location. It is not an office location. It is not a commercial location, and it ain't gonna be either. And with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we welcome Margaret Magner. Are you speaking on behalf of the West? Okay,
yes,
just want to note for Sarah Taylor Farrell. Thank you. The time clock has been adjusted.
Thanks. Good evening. I'm Margaret Magner from the West End Civic Association. I'm here to provide feedback on behalf of approximately 45 residents of our neighborhood who discussed the Town Center Master Plan at our regular monthly neighborhood meeting on October 10th. Clearly not all of the 1,600 households from our neighborhood were represented, but we have done a lot of outreach and community emails, and there was lively discussion with many neighbors speaking about the plan and requesting that WECA testify to their points. 4 key topics emerged as concerns agreed on by most of the group, and those were parking, building height on the edge, on the western edge, schools capacity, and the challenge of responding to major changes near the end of the public comment process, as you've heard. Here are some of the specific points that residents made. I don't have time to share all of them, but my written comments do. Parking. Many neighbors can't understand the proposal in the plan draft that the city fully abdicate its role to ensure that parking is adequate and leave this entirely to housing market forces. There was concern that those future residents who do use a car and shoppers and diners who may need to be attracted from non-walking or non-transit areas of the city or the county might become too frustrated and give up on RTC. Many people, such as the elderly and others with mobility challenges, people with 2 jobs who have to quickly get from one to the other, can't get along without a car. The cost of contracting separately for parking is already a deterrent for some to choose RTC as their dwelling place. Rockville wants to provide more affordable and attainable housing, but adding hundreds of dollars more to monthly costs for demand-sensitive parking for those who need a car can price us out of the market for those we seek to attract. Although the space that was formerly Dawson's, this is another point, is currently empty, the parking lot adjacent to that space is packed every day with people waiting for space, even in the absence of an anchor merchant. There was great concern about spillover traffic and parking onto neighborhood streets. A neighbor cited having experienced personally the result of large-scale development in DC, many of which were allowed with diminished on-site parking requirements, and that was why he moved to Maryland. If the assumption is that only dwellers and visitors who walk or bike can create the density and be the neighborhood and economic stimulus needed to sustain and grow RTC, is there data to support this assumption? Quickly to building height on the border, there was concern that the higher height encouraged by the bonus feature was added to the plan draft for construction along that 3-block western side transition character area. The total new height of 125 feet could result in 13-story buildings, nearly double the height of the buildings across the street, which is the opposite of a transition area. Combined with the lack of parking minimums, this border bonus could result in 13-story buildings with no resident parking 1 street away from neighborhood blocks. The edge area that was identified for the bonus is along the 3 blocks that contain the only structures remaining from Rockville's original downtown. The plan recognizes the detriment of urban renewal to Rockville's Black community, but the city has an opportunity to honor and celebrate structures such as the Jerusalem Mount Pleasant United Methodist Church on Wood Lane, rather than putting up 13-story buildings to hide them. The transition character area was identified in the plan, but no explanation was given or consultation done about what type of character is intended for this place, how this will be achieved, or why the additional height on these particular border blocks is in the public interest. Okay, I'm gonna, schools capacity, I will have to skip, especially since you all have confirmed that you don't see changing the school capacity testing. A resident who came to the meeting with her printed out copy of the 177-page new plan draft expressed the difficulty in getting the news that there were changes, finding and educating herself about the changes, getting answers to new questions they raised about the plan, and preparing and communicating her feedback to the mayor and council, all within the period between publication on 25th September and tonight. So in conclusion, the West End Civic Association, speaking for those 45 residents, asks the mayor and council to retain reasonable parking minimums in the plan, define the need and purpose for the transition character area, require temporary construction marker balloons, which I didn't go into before, but marking the by right and bonus height limits so people can see them. Confirm that the plan's current school capacity be and add some more time for people to comment at the end.
Appreciate it. Welcome, Mr. Bob Elliott.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Ashton and City Council members. My name is Bob Elliott. I am a Rockville resident in the West End, and I also represent the ownership of 255 Rockville Pike. Our property has a prominent location right across the street from the Metro Rail station and is a gateway to the town center. For those that are traveling across the pedestrian bridge, it's the property you arrive at when you cross Rockville Pike. Our property is the last remaining vestige of the 1970s Rockville Mall and was most recently used by the Rockville city government as office space until they vacated in 2021. We acquired this vacant distressed asset at auction in early 2024 and are preparing a redevelopment application that adaptively reuses the existing building's footprint, sidewalk, streetscape, and structured parking garage and ultimately transforms it into a phased multifamily redevelopment. Overall, we are very supportive of the objectives within the town center draft and for providing additional housing within the town center and incentivizing adaptive reuse of outmoded office buildings. However, we have some suggestions for improvement. My time, well, I thought I was only going to be given 3 minutes. I'm happy to have 5, but I won't use it all. So I will focus on 2 items. I might actually have some time to talk about a couple other things. I'm going to focus mostly on height and the BRT station. But again, I am summarizing a letter that I sent to you all via my counsel. You should have received it on Friday. It's probably in your package. It's about 7 pages long. First, we feel that you should actually increase the height incentive. In our opinion, the height incentive as proposed is insufficiently compelling. The core character area as proposed has a minimum or has a height of 200 feet with a maximum bonus of 50. Our property was previously entitled or granted a maximum height of 217 feet. That effectively caps our bonus at only 33 feet. We recommend a maximum height of 290 feet to address the need for potentially putting 20% ADUs, and that total height be made available to us, not necessarily for providing green space, but for adaptively redeveloping a strategically important site, because doing so provides a valuable public benefit and does not destruct the carbon component associated with breaking down most of that building. Second, the Planning Commission draft recommended the city advocate for a southbound Rockville Metro Station BRT stop to be located on the south side of Middle Lane, which is effectively our property. Our preference would be to place that BRT station on the north side of East Middle Lane, which is consistent with the Montgomery County current 95% design draft for the BRT. Our property is already significantly site constrained, and a successful adaptive reuse of our property depends on maintaining existing functionality. In the event that the BRT station ends up on our property, then we believe it should be designed in a way that minimizes its impact on our property's ability to redevelop to the greatest extent practicable. This includes consideration of, among other things, decreasing the size of the station features, including its stormwater management, maintaining access to an existing parking structure, and allowing for vehicular circulation for a variety of users, tenants, visitors, food package deliveries, all of which exist today. We'd also ask for safe pedestrian access to a prominent main lobby entrance along Rockville Pike. Our building is named 255 Rockville Pike for a reason. Other items I would just point out very quickly. In your town center plan, I think you identified our site as possibly having 350 residential units. Our current plan, which we'll be coming forward with tomorrow night, hopefully 300 units in a first phase and 250 in a subsequent phase. So that's hopefully 550, literally across the street from a metro station. Within the focus areas of your plan, while we strongly believe for the need in supporting the retail components, we actually believe that most of the retail should be supported nearer to the town center and the town square. We don't believe at this point that retail survives on the periphery, unfortunately, even if you are at the metro station. We support the need for mixed use. We support the need for activation along the street level, but not necessarily as retail itself. You'll actually see a significant amount of retail along Monroe Street today that has never been leased. We generally agree with the town center plan draft that includes flexitory regulatory environment, things that result in the highest and best use for the land, streamlining and simplifying of development approvals, innovative and creative developments, removing unnecessary regulatory barriers to redevelopment. We're actually supportive of parking minimums in the appropriate areas, particularly when you're opposite the metro station. Flexibility for adaptive reuse, and ultimately allowing developers to meet the market demand. Thank you very much for your time, and if I may, good night to my daughter Elizabeth, who's watching at home.
Thank you very much.
Apparently intently at age 4, future
Thank you.
developer. Thank you very much.
That exhausts the list of those who have signed up in advance. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Welcome, Mr. Jacobek. Are you representing RBAC or yourself? Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I live in East Rockville, across the railroad tracks from the town center. So for me, the town center is like my downtown. I walk there all the time. I ride my bike to the square. I go to the library. I go to the restaurants. I spend some time playing guitar in town square with a friend of mine. So I feel that I very much have a stake in all this, and it's very important to me that the town center succeed. After reviewing the plan, hearing comments and such, I support what's been done. I agree with the gentleman prior to me. I think we should remove these height requirements. We should have more people in the town center. As we all know, it was established that as it currently sits, we need a larger population in the town center for it to work, for the retail business to succeed and everything else. So I'm in support of that. I also support the elimination of these parking requirements. Let the market decide. We have 4 billion parking spaces in the United States. I think we could do with a little fewer. So in summary, I support the plan. I look forward to working on implementing it, and I look forward to having a nice downtown Rockville just outside my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Welcome.
Hey, I just wanted to say, I guess in response to some of the comments, so I live in Rockville now and I can walk to town center, which is awesome. Before that, I lived in Darewood, which was a 5-minute drive, and Potomac, which was a 15 to 20-minute drive. And I come into Rockville all the time and I never went to town center. I went anywhere along the pike where I could park. My mom lives in Darewood, my sister lives in Darewood. They spend plenty of money in Rockville, not at the town center, because they can't get there. And I think it's important, if you're building this now and you don't care about parking for people that live maybe farther out in Twinbrook or Aspen Hill or Olney or Darewood, then you're building it only for the people who can afford to live there. And they're just not gonna come. I think the plan mentions Rio a lot. We love going to Rio. It's super easy to park. You can walk everywhere, which is nice. So yeah, if people can't get there who can't live there, they're not gonna come. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Welcome. Noreen Bryant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm Noreen Bryan. I've lived here for a long time, and I've worked with a great many of the West End neighbors. They love town center, and they want it to thrive. And as the last gentleman just said, so does East Rockville and Lincoln Park, to the best of my knowledge. I'm very concerned because the focus of this plan is almost exclusively on heights and adding density, when we've got a lot of other issues to address. Let's look at some facts. Throngs of people pass through Rockville Town Center every day. 50,000 people and more go right down Rockville Pike. Since 2006, we've added nearly 2,000 housing units. That's 4,000 people. And in the neighborhoods adjacent, there are approximately 11,000 people. When you add this all together, nearly 1/4 of Rockville's population is within walking distance of town center. So why isn't it thriving? And I think we have to ask some really hard questions. Why don't travelers stop here when they're going on the pike? Why don't most of the people who live here shop here more? They want to shop here. They want to go to entertainment here. I'm going to give you a few suggestions. One is, when you go down the pike, the rest of town center is invisible. There's inadequate signage, and there's nothing that attracts you to the internal workings of the organization of town center. Why don't there's tons of service and delivery people going down the pike every day. Why don't they come here for lunch? Why don't they stop for a drink after work? Why don't they shop here? We need to ask that question and find out why. We need town center to be integrated. We need not just the heart of town center, which is off the pike. We need the pikes part of it to be integrated with the internal part. And it needs to have a focus. People who live here want to shop here. That means we need basic shopping capabilities. We've just lost Dawson's. We do have Giant, but we've asked for a hardware store for decades. And if you look around the county, Stroh Snyder's is successful in Potomac, in Kensington, and I don't know, off the top of my head, I forgot Bethesda. Stroh Snyder's is working. I'm near the end. The last thing is we need much better connectivity immediately for people in East Rockville and Lincoln Park. They need safe, attractive ways to get to town center so we can be a whole and not just pieces. And so I strongly suggest that you table this plan and look harder and get more inventive ideas into this plan. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak? Welcome. Are you speaking as an individual or as a peerless lead? Okay. Welcome.
I didn't want to go in front of someone else. Speaking for Peerless, thank you.
Okay, the clock will be adjusted. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Nancy Picard speaking on behalf of Peerless Rockville about the Town Center Master Plan. Speaking to advise thoughtful, detailed, and collaborative planning in the development of Rockville's Town Center. Planning that balances the needs for growth and change with the needs of current and future residents, visitors, and businesses, and that also protects and celebrates the unique history, historic resources, and sense of community at the very heart of Rockville. In your review of the current draft, Peerless Rockville encourages careful consideration of the newly added transition character area on the western edge, which abuts established neighborhoods and 3 historic districts. While this part of our modern town center warrants special attention and a detailed vision, it is missing in the current draft. I wish to be clear that Peerless Rockville supports development, increased heights in the core, additional density, and additional housing opportunities, all of which are needed and will bring depth, diversity, economic stimulus, and new layers of history and character to the city core. We enthusiastically embrace smart planning that keeps historic buildings and communities a part of the city's modern and future identity, with additional resources to help the city thrive into the future. However, development should occur with a mindfulness of the history and the character of the city, and in accordance with the city's own stated planning goals, as well as those of the state. Embracing the historic character and unique features of place is of itself smart planning, as historic preservation and established place identity are known economic drivers and contribute to Rockville's draw as a special, unique place to live. The current draft is unclear for the overall planning area, particularly on the critical western edge, on what specific goals and vision is intended for the transition area. The Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel in 2019 generated the actionable item to build density in the town center without compromising character. But the current draft does not address this aspect. Additionally, none of the policies or actions in the historic preservation chapter of the document address how multiple historic sites and districts in or within walking distance of town center will be protected or utilized in establishing the area's identity or encouraging heritage tourism. For example, next year, Christ Episcopal Church will celebrate its 300th anniversary. This historic church is barely a stone's throw from the current new transition area. Thoughtful planning that reflects Rockville's unique situation and current needs should guide the redevelopment plans in town center, not just blanket height increases across the core. The plan calls for a mix of housing types and densities, but then leans heavily on building heights and an unspecified bonus program. Current recommendations for North and South Washington Street will likely overwhelm the historic buildings from West Montgomery Avenue to Bell Avenue, including the last surviving parts of the African American community of Middle Lane. At Peerless Rockville, I often view the photos and records of urban renewal, a celebrated planning endeavor that embraced the popular planning maxims of the day. However, we now know that the planning decisions made over a half-century ago forever adversely altered Rockville and continue to impact the city today. With strong new by-right zoning throughout the draft plan, the city will develop, it will grow, it will add housing. But carefully transitioning from more intense growth down to human-scale neighborhoods will protect our sense of history and community and also allow for commercial vibrancy, new population growth, and hopefully better connection between Rockville Town Center and the neighborhoods across 355. Increased heights in the core and along the eastern edge will better take advantage of multimodal transportation and existing densities. In closing, I ask the mayor and council to take this revised draft back to the community to re-engage residents and business owners for a plan that is right-sized for Rockville now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Welcome.
Hey, good evening. My name is Christopher Nellis. I live at 263 Crystal Lane, apartment 604. Book as want to testify in support of the proposed downtown master plan. As a young person and such, people of my generation who have moved to this area, we need more place to live, and this is one of the ways we can do that. I lived in Rockville for 3 years, and I really enjoyed it. I like make this my permanent home. Right now, I can't afford a house right now in the city limits, but I would love to buy a condo or live in an apartment. And the downtown master plan, living downtown, would be a dream for me. As there have been many comments about parking, I will only say my experience. When I do drive into Rockville Town Center, I have not had a problem finding parking. The biggest implement is that you had to pay for it. You had to go into a parking garage. On Saturday, I realized that the parking garage, most of the places there were being used by a car dealership to store the inventory. So I do not believe that there is a significant concern with parkings. I also attended the planning commission meeting last month where they expanded the parking minimum ban, another right terminology, to the entire downtown master area. I would not describe it as a bait and switch. I do not think it is sufficient to rescind this and send it back to planning because I do not think that is a correct course of action. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. Thank you to everyone for your comments. Very thoughtful, and we appreciate them. I want to I know that Mayor and Council is not going to go into the specifics of the plan just yet. We're going to be listening further, and we'll meet again December 9th. Just quickly, when will the public hearing period end? And maybe that's something we can at least clarify.
So I think ultimately that's up to you. Staff would recommend keeping that open through the December 9th work session. So for the next month and a half or so, you can continue to hear from members of the community, and then you can bring up what you've heard at that work session.
So colleagues, let me know what you think about this. I'm open to hearing until closer to when we are setting to approve this plan, which I believe is in January. And I'm also open to adding another public hearing. We know we have some important work sessions coming up. I did listen to the Planning Commission, and they had multiple work sessions and allowances for people to come. So I just want to make sure we have maximum opportunity for people to comment and for it to be part of the public record. Colleagues, what are your thoughts? Councilmember Jackson? Yes, okay. Which part? All of it? How about my other colleagues? Yes, okay. Councilmember Van Grack.
My only comment would be, I don't want to push ourselves too close to the edge to the extent there's issues. So I want to make sure that we've got time. If we're going to adjust anything, I don't want us to be running up and extending it for either multiple times that we have to. So I'm all for, additional communication with the public, additional feedback, as well as additional work sessions. But I know that we're running up against a clock, and I don't want to have a difficulty with us given the meeting schedules and the things we already have.
Thank you. Just to share what I was thinking, we could have additional hearing on one of the December meetings. Just a thought from my colleagues' consideration. I know you don't have to answer this now because you may need to go back to your staff and review. And then we could also have, if we need it, I know that Mr. Mihalik has shared that we could either extend the time or we could also add an additional work session. There appears to be some time in December for that second meeting. Councilmember Fulton.
So I'm in favor of keeping the public record open until we get much closer to deciding, yes. Committing here and now to another work session or when it might, I think we should just keep that option available as things come. But in terms of keeping the record open, yeah, very much support that.
So I see, well, we have folks open to having the additional public hearing as well before our next work session?
no,
Or
I
whenever
mean,
staff can.
again,
Wait,
I'm-
1 second, hold on. Whenever staff can, if it fits in the calendar. Councilmember Van
Yeah,
Gogh,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say, I'm concerned about the number of meetings we have going forward in a timeline. I want to keep the record open. I want to hear from folks as much as we can. To the extent there's something that we can fit in, that's fine. But I don't want to here and now commit necessarily to another whole meeting when we've got only one meeting in November scheduled currently.
Councilmember Valeri.
I concur. If it works out timing-wise, I would be open to additional hearings if there is strategic targeted outreach to get more feedback from residents who actually live in Rockville Town Center. I think I've stated this a bunch, and I don't mean to be a broken record, but I feel that the community that lives in Rockville Town Center should have the opportunity to provide any sort of feedback. I'm not getting a lot of that. I'm hearing a lot from surrounding neighborhoods, which is equally great. But for me, if the issues of people who live maybe right next to or across the street from some of these issues that we're discussing would be very important to me. So however we want to do that, whether it is targeted outreach during the open comment period, or if there is another date that works, I'm open to either way, but that's kind of where my thinking is at generally.
Can I just do a straw poll on folks, just because I want to make clear, who wants to allow additional public hearings? Should it fit in the schedule? Just a straw poll. Dr. Miles, is yours a question or you? Okay. 1, 2, 3.
I'm voting in favor of additional public hearing.
Okay.
Mine had conditions on it.
Yeah.
If it was timing, scheduling. Yeah.
I mean,
Wait 1 second, hold on. Let me call the order. Councilmember Valeri.
Mine was conditioned on outreach, but our schedule is as well.
I agree, and the comment
Schedule
was
meetings.
additional public hearings should the city manager be able to find time for it. Councilmember Fulton, I saw your hand.
I am very much open to an additional public hearing and keeping the record open. I don't know that we need to make that decision now. We need to see what kind of input comes in and what the plan is per what Councilmember Valeri says. I am open to it, but not doing a straw poll in favor of necessarily deciding that right now.
Thank you. So our city manager, our next meeting is November 18th, and our city manager would just need our general guidance so that he knows whether to go and look for time. Councilmember Shaw.
I just have a quick question around, Councilmember Valeri made a really good point around the residents in Town Center. And I know that there was some outreach last year to residents. So I would just ask about the demographic data for residents in Town Center. Particularly, there's a number of renters there, just to be informed of who has been engaged.
I completely agree with those comments, and a part of this is also seeing that since the new plan has been released, there hasn't been a significant change in comments or the survey responses. So I completely agree that I want to make sure that we're being inclusive with the different parts of Rockville. Councilmember Van Gogh.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I want more feedback. I want to hold the record open, and I want to see if we can have another hearing. But when you're called to the question moments ago, you said, to the extent we can fit it in time-wise. To me, that's a huge caveat. That's not just a minor caveat. We've got only one meeting in November. We've got a timeline that we heard. We heard some concerns from numerous members of the public today regarding edits and different sections that we might want to do with regard to this plan. And we also heard that if we don't do anything within 90 days, it passes as is. So I don't want to push us too close to that edge because we're looking to do too many things when we've got a limited number of meetings. Again, I want to hear from the public. I want to keep the record open. I want to see if we can have another hearing. But that issue of timing to do so is a pretty critical issue for me because I don't want to fall back on having this by default passed when we've already heard from the public regarding concerns.
Thank you. I think that's an important comment. I did specifically ask staff, just when I was asking generally about the plan, not about the hearing process, that there is a process to extend the time of 90 days. This is a really important plan for our city. It has so many sections: economic development, housing, pedestrian safety. There's a lot to cover. We have one work session and then one planned approval time. And so I'm just getting a sense of your temperature to see, should the city manager be looking at adding additional time, or, and he said two things, you can extend the time or you could look at adding more meetings between now and the January period. So I just wanted to see where you all stand on that, because this is an important plan for our city. Mr. Mihalik, did you want to say something?
I was just looking at 6-month planning calendar, just to see if there's gaps. What I think I heard from the commission was, let's have the work session and then just go from there. But I'll keep this in mind in case we have to create time in a future agenda in December or January.
Thank you. Yeah, and we can get into this later, but like short-term rentals is not that time sensitive, right? We could move something if needed. Councilmember Jackson, did you want to add any commentary? Okay. Dr. Miles, did you want to say something?
No, ma'am. I was just saying I'm okay with adding.
Adding. Okay. All right. Councilmember Valeri.
If it's okay. This message is for Ms. Gerbs. The initial deadline of when the decision needs to be made by, is this because of when the process began, I presume? So under code, this is why we're constrained to this time period?
The start date is the date of transmission, which is an authorized signature from the chair of the Planning Commission to you all, and that took place on October the 18th.
Okay.
We were trying to be as strategic as we could about that date and get that as close to this meeting date as we reasonably could, so as not to start the clock, say, in September, but have a month of wasted time.
Gotcha. And so the timing is 90 days unless there is a extension of 60 days?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be clear in my brain where this was coming from. I was trying to figure out, I'm like, where is the deadline? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard from my colleagues that we're trying to get additional different parts of the city, particularly Rockville Town Center engagement. I think that's an important point. So I wanted to echo those comments. The other thing, the reason why I was just trying to get a sense of my colleagues in terms of adding the public hearing is that we meet again November 18th, but you do have to notice public hearings, and there's a period of time. So with that, I think I heard that there was enough support for additional public hearing, but I want to just double check. Should the city manager be able to fit it in the schedule, can you please just straw poll if you are willing to add an additional public hearing?
If it can be fit.
Right, if it can be fit.
Only if, yeah.
Okay.
Clarification.
Councilmember Fulton.
I struggle with how that question is asked. I think we need more public engagement. We absolutely do. We should keep the record open. As my colleague said, we should be doing things to try to get to town center. We should be really pushing. I think we've heard some asks about what are the changes, and we should highlight them for the community so they can see them clearly and we can get their input on them. All of that, I think, is really important. I don't necessarily think that getting that requires an additional public hearing. Like, it forces people to come here. It's hard. There are other ways to get feedback. We can accept written records. We can go to the community. Yeah. So that's why I struggle with it being centered on right now deciding, do we need another public hearing? Do we need more feedback? Absolutely. Do we need to be clear in our communication about what's changing? Absolutely. But I don't know that we need another public hearing.
Thank you for your feedback. Councilmember Valeri.
I just had an idea, and everybody can shoot me down. I will not take offense at this, but we've been getting a request for almost weeks now to be certain for a town hall for town center. Is it possible to have that? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. To have that, maybe there's a better time period, an evening or a weekend, where that could also, or instead of, be a public hearing for individuals in town center to bring forth concerns. So basically, two birds, one stone is what I'm thinking.
Thank you. I will ask Ms. Taylor Farrell, and I'll just note that I think there was majority support for a public hearing should it fit in the schedule. But I also think that you have to find ways to get to people, so go to people. I think that there would be a good opportunity to have a meeting in Town Center. We've been hearing requests for that. I know that some of us talked about it this morning, that I know the Engage Rockville presentation to Mayor and Council has been moved to January or February, but I do want to make sure that we're thinking about the context of this plan and the outreach to Town Center residents as well. So I will also support an additional idea like that. Councilmember Shaw.
Just as a resident in Town Center, I think the city did a really great job of reaching out to Town Center last year. There's a particular part of Town Center, I think it's the northern part of Town Center, where the city has the highest percentage of poverty. I think it's almost like 25%. And I would be interested in some type of like focus group or some type of particular outreach to that particular part of Town Center.
Thank you. And to the comment by my colleague on clarifying, I'll go to Dr. Miles next, just what the changes were. I think Councilmember Fulton raised it. I think it would be important. I know we added a nice bar on top of the Engage Rockville site. I think it's important to post this presentation as well, particularly the slide that highlights what are the major changes that have been made so that people who don't have time to get through the 100+ page report can easily see, what are the major things that they should be looking out for and commenting on. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just voicing support for that focus group of folks who are economically challenged there in Town Center, Town Square. That's all.
I support that as well. I'm going to look to staff and see if you have any clarifying questions in terms of the public engagement process and next steps.
We heard clearly that you guys wanted to have a special engagement for residents in and around Town Center, including the targeted area that has a greater preponderance of levels of poverty. Heard that clearly. We'll look for some dates and times that might work for everybody and make sure that gets publicized to maximize attendance.
Can you repeat the last part again?
To maximize attendance.
So you're going to do a community meeting and then potentially look at it scheduling a public hearing. There was majority support for that. I saw at least 4 hands. If someone wants to take their hand away, please feel free.
Yeah.
There's Councilmember Shaw. I saw your hand, Councilmember Jackson. Maybe you want to change, but I just wanted to clarify. Councilmember Van Grack and then Councilmember Shaw after that.
I mean, again, I want to reiterate, I think everybody here wants to have as much engagement as possible. But if we're talking about having now multiple different in-person meetings without an actual date that we've set, we're going to be, again, running up against clocks. I mean, I don't know how many 60-day extensions. I mean, are we only allowed one 60-day extension? So we've only got one 60-day extension. We've got multiple hearings. I want to make sure we're not getting into a point where we're either defaulting into this plan or running up against any clocks. Again, I want to make sure we have feedback, but I don't want to just have the council's wish list of a lot of different meetings, multiple hearings, to which we are running up against the clock and we're having trouble, because I don't even know if we've got a date for any of the above. So I just want to be cautious in what we're instructing staff to do with regard to approval of the Town Center Master Plan.
I think we're asking staff to go back and look at the schedule to see what can be done within the time frame and then to get back to us.
I'll just be clear.
Councilmember Van Grack.
Asking staff to look to see what might be able to be done, I can support, as opposed to specifically saying that we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're not sure if we can fit into a schedule.
That is dependent on it fitting into a schedule. Councilmember Shaw.
I just wanted to clarify my request around the area of Town Center, around the higher concentration of poverty, that not a public hearing, more like a focus group or something where we're likely not there, just to make it easier for people to share their feedback. I think there was a focus group done last year, and I think that was a really good model.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Councilmember Valeri.
And thank you, Councilmember Shaw. I was just thinking, we're really only looking at the addition of one in person. I believe, in Councilmember Shaw, if I'm mistaken, please let me know. A focus group would be invite only because you would want a particular community to be, that's the reason why we do focus groups. And not that everyone's not welcome, but you want to make sure that people from a targeted community are heard. I am basically, my suggestion was because frankly, we've had this request. We have not moved on the request for a town center meeting. And I believe that one meeting between now and January should be feasible, especially if we have the flexibility of not having to decide on a Monday night meeting. But I do defer to staff on that.
Mr. Mihaela, can you please summarize what you understand the next steps are?
So definitely identify an area for a potential work session. Two, to have a focus group discussion with areas with higher levels of poverty near town center. I don't know that I heard from four of you that you want to have a separate in-person town center meeting. I think I saw four, but I wasn't positive of that. So we could clarify that, Mayor. I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, so the work session is just generally potentially us talking, right?
Yep.
To break up the sections of the plan a little bit.
Yep.
Because I know that there are multiple areas of, the zoning and housing is one thing, but there's also public safety and transportation and other things that are outlined in the plan. Let's just do a straw poll on that. Who is in favor of additional work session? Again, if it fits in the timeline of the plan and we don't put ourselves at risk of defaulting to the plan as is.
So we're only talking about work session, not additional.
That's what he's asking about. We're going to go through all of them. Okay. Because I just want him to be very clear. Yeah. And there are a few people who have said some parts of it, not others, but a work session. So this would be, right now we have a work session December 9th. That is to cover, right now as it is, not only the entire town center master plan, but also the WMATA plan. It's a lot for one evening. We may need more time. But I'm asking this question because I also know some people said, well, let's just leave a space for it. And if we need it, we'll use it. So just want to see, do you guys want the city manager to look at the schedule and potentially shift some things around to hold a space for it? If we don't need it, we don't need it. But are you all in favor of allowing additional work session should we need it? Yeah. Councilmember Jackson has a follow-up. Van Grack.
I mean, I just want to clarify, we only have one meeting in November, and we only have, I believe, 2 or 3 meetings in December. We've already got this scheduled for December 9th. We want to be able to exhaust this, but I'm not sure, and I'll ask the city manager, I mean, are we talking about something, I mean, we're not talking about having an additional work session. We're talking about having an additional hearing here in the chamber, and then we're also talking about a town center meeting, which I'm all in favor of. I think these are great, but we're also, again, and I hate to keep going back to this, running up against the clock, that if we only get one extension, and if we don't act before then, the plan that I think there potentially could be some amendments to it would be defaulted as accepted.
That's correct.
So we do have a meeting at December 16 that currently has short-term rentals. It is scheduled for 90 minutes. We could make a game plan should we need the additional time that gets moved, and additional timing for the town center plan could be added. Or we could actually extend the time. Then, we run the risk of just having one extension period, but that is what could happen. So just to give the city manager time to look at this, are folks interested in pursuing this if he can find the time? Again, contingent on finding the time and contingent on this also not running up against the clock and defaulting to the plan as is. Where do you stand? Okay. All right, so that. You got your clarification on the work session. What else do you need clarification on?
The in-person meeting generally in town center with residents who live there.
Okay, now, just for my colleagues, we're looking at an in-person meeting in town center and then an invite-only focus group, because there were two different concepts discussed there.
Two different, yeah.
Councilmember Shaw.
So I just want to be clear. I do agree that there could always be more engagement, particularly in town center. My comment was just focusing on that particular area and it being based on information or data and demographic data. Have we already had a large engagement with that particular community already? And if not, then I would recommend doing a focus group area there.
Councilmember Shaw, that's a question for staff. I heard a question.
Yes. And I think, and the reason why I'm saying it's a focus group as opposed to us being there, I think it provides more, as a focus group, it provides perhaps more comfort for community members to share freely.
We have some data from last summer. I would say it's a little bit dated. If there's a desire to have a focus group meeting for that same group, we would recommend having that separately.
So it sounds like you need to look at your schedules and see what's possible, is what I'm reading from you all as staff.
Agreed.
Could you, you've heard the interests of, could you just check your schedule and see what's possible?
Yep.
And come back to us with a recommendation based on your staff expertise?
Yep.
Councilmember Fulton and O'Leary, did you have something you want to say?
I wanted to make sure that I'm not, were we at enough are interested in the town center meeting, given the parameters of between now and January 9th? Or am I thinking December 9th? Whenever the deadline is. Did you get feedback from enough of us that were interested in it?
I don't know that I could count to 4 to be crystal clear.
No, that's fine. Then I would ask my colleagues if anyone else was interested. If not.
So I'm reading from staff that they need some time to look at schedules and come back to us. But I know I will support additional outreach for underrepresented groups in particular, as well as the town center piece. I want all the public feedback. I feel like there's a lot of new items in this that we need to give people time to look at, but we also need to be timely with our approval.
Yep. So what I'm going to bring back, Mayor, is a potential schedule for maybe an additional work session, definitely an in-person engagement where people living in town center, and a third focus group for the select area that we talked about earlier. I'll look at dates, work with the team. We'll come up with a plan for you guys to consider.
Councilmember Shaw.
Could you also provide more data
Yes.
that you had? Okay.
Colleagues, are you okay with allowing staff to go back and look at the schedule and come back to us with a recommendation? They get it. They get what we're trying to do here. Get more community feedback. All right. I'm looking at Dr. Miles. You're good? Okay. And then just lastly, can we update the website to include the key changes?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone who has participated in this. As we work through this process, we really appreciate all of your commentary. Again, if you're listening, engagerockville.com. You can go on there and provide feedback on this plan. And then you can also email the mayor and council should you desire. All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate this. So I know some of my colleagues need a quick bio break, and I'm going to call for maybe 7 minutes. That's okay? All right. Thank you. Welcome back, Rockville. We will reconvene our meeting 26-24. Today is still October 28th, 2024. We'll be moving into our work session discussion, item 12A, facilitate discussion and direction from the mayor and council. Up, 1 second.
11.
Sorry, I said 11. Moving forward on 11, introduction and partial adoption to adoption of an ordinance to amend ordinance 9-24 to appropriate funds and levy taxes for FY25 budget amendment. I know that staff has shared some feedback with us and gave us a heads up about this budget amendment. Just want to see if staff would like to present briefly what the amendment is so that a public is aware of the major changes. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Mary Sue Martin with the Finance Department. I'll just walk you briefly through the highlights for tonight's budget amendment. This is the second budget amendment for FY25. This amendment includes the reappropriation of funding encumbered in purchase orders at the end of FY24, as well as unobligated CDBG grant funding, an adjustment of the current ADA coordinator position from part-time to full-time, funding for cable production equipment supported by restricted cable grant revenues, a lead and copper survey incentive program, funding to replace the sewer line rapid assessment tool supported by insurance claim revenue, additional funds to support an increase in the cost of planned replacement for refuse vehicles for this fiscal year, state bond bill funding for the David Skull Park Improvement CIP project, and a Chesapeake Bay Trust Urban Tree Program grant for reforestation at Redgate Park. Additionally, this amendment appropriates $710,000 in unassigned general fund reserves to fund the employee leave buyback program and necessary asphalt repair and replacement. If this amendment is adopted, the total appropriated by fund would change as shown on the budget ordinance in attachment A. Tonight, staff recommends that the mayor and council introduce the ordinance, waive the layover period, and adopt the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask staff questions before we move forward? Okay, all right. So next we can move the ordinance or introduce the ordinance. It does not require a second.
Madam Mayor, I would like to introduce the ordinance to amend Ordinance 9-24 to appropriate funds and levy taxes for FY 2025 as listed in our agenda packet.
Wonderful. Would anyone like to move to waive the layover period? Councilmember Valeri.
I move to waive the layover period.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Jackson, seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next, we need to adopt the ordinance. Who would like to make a motion? Councilmember Jackson.
I move to adopt the ordinance to amend Ordinance 924 to appropriate funds and levy taxes for FY 2025.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Shaw seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to Agenda Item 12A for our facilitated discussion and direction from the Mayor and Council regarding King Farm Farmstead Park Complex adaptive reuse and master plan process. I'm going to turn it over to City Manager to introduce a new staff member.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the courtesy. I just want to introduce Tara Stewart, our new Rec and Park Director. There she is at the end of the table. Really excited that she's joined our team, and we have to be nice. It's her first presentation to the City Council. So, Tara, are you starting it off?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
First,
Thank
I'll
you,
just
Mayor.
say welcome, Tara. We really appreciate you and welcome you to the city.
Thank you
It won't
very
be too
much.
hard.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Tara Stewart, Director of Recreation and Parks, and we are happy to be here this evening to kick off the master planning process for the King Farm Farmstead Park. Next slide. So tonight's presentation will utilize the following format. We will highlight the purpose and expected outcomes from tonight's work session. We'll describe the connection of this project to the Mayor and Council's core commitments and focus areas. We will review our work session prompts so you can be thinking about our requested feedback as you hear tonight's presentation. We will introduce you to the consultant team that will be working with the city on the master planning process. We'll provide an overview of the property's major milestones regarding acquisition, past community and task force recommendations, and site studies conducted to date. We'll describe current site conditions, property usage considerations, and highlight the buildings and structures that are present on the site today. We'll review the planned community engagement phases, and review next steps in the master planning process. And finally, we'll round out the presentation tonight with mayor and council questions and facilitated discussion during our work session to capture your feedback and guidance. Next slide. As described in the previous outline, we have specific goals for tonight's work session. In addition to providing the mayor and council with an overview of the King Farm Farmstead Park, reviewing the history and major milestones for the property, and reviewing our master planning process, our goal really is to capture the mayor and council's feedback on desired uses and operation of the Farmstead Park, and to confirm your broad direction on adaptive reuse strategies for King Farm Farmstead Park. Next slide. With this project, the Department of Recreation and Parks confirms our connection to the mayor and council's core commitments and focus areas, specifically stewardship of the environment and infrastructure. The King Farm Farmstead is an important historic resource to the city. Through this project, we demonstrate our responsibility for being good stewards of parkland resources that have been entrusted to the city. Our goal is to provide high-quality project management and development to improve city facilities and park land amenities. Effective and efficient service delivery. Through this project, we want to ensure residents have access to public recreation spaces that meet their overall wellness needs. This includes offering programs and services that benefit the physical, social, emotional, cultural, and environmental needs of our community. Economic development. Through this project, we hope to offer enhanced quality of life opportunities through a revitalized park and expanded recreation opportunities. And finally, public safety. Through this project, we can provide well-maintained and accessible park facilities and open space, allowing residents to enjoy the city's beautiful parks and to recreate safely. Next slide. To capture the mayor and council's feedback on desired uses and operation of the King Farm Farmstead Park, and to confirm your broad direction on adaptive reuse and operational strategies, we have a few questions that will be used during the work session that we would like you to be thinking about as you hear the rest of tonight's presentation. Do you support developing amenities at King Farm Farmstead Park to alleviate the identified deficiencies of indoor recreation space within the adopted Department of Recreation and Parks strategic plan? As you may recall, within our strategic plan, there was an identified deficiency of over 57,000 square feet of indoor recreation space. There was also a deficiency identified of over 7,000 square feet of special use and cultural facilities. Our next question, are there uses and operational strategies that are not preferred for this park? And do you support the master planning process as described this evening? We look forward to the work session discussion and to receiving your feedback and guidance. Next slide. Now I would like to introduce our project consultant, Mr. Matthew Herbert from Design Collective, who will provide additional information on the park site, our master planning process, and facilitate tonight's work session. Matt?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for this opportunity. We enjoy our partnerships with all of our municipalities throughout the state, and we're especially happy to be here tonight and going forward to help the city of Rockville plan for King Farm, the farmstead. I'm with Design Collective. We're an employee-owned firm that's been operating in Maryland for over 40 plus years with 80 employees located in Baltimore. We work with several municipalities and private entities with master planning efforts and re-engaging in properties just like this, looking at proper highest and best use, cost considerations, viability, and architectural strategies to maximize the return on the city's investment. We look forward to doing this with King Farm as it presents a very unique historical and contextual portion of the northern part of the city that we'll kind of talk about in the history of the site and really looking at ways to celebrate that history, but also providing the needs of the city's residents, whether it be more outdoor space or other uses that you may all have input on this evening. So first, we'll talk kind of briefly about our proposed strategy for looking at the property with the city and the council. First, we want to look at, as Tara mentioned, what are the broadest strategic visions? Are there things that are already envisioned for the site from the direction of the mayor and the council? How we can bring those ideas in and be as inclusive as possible. We've heard that a lot tonight to make sure that we're getting proper feedback in everything that the city does. So we have laid out a brief strategy to go through in terms of how to capture some of that engagement and really work on the good work that the city has done over the time that they've had this property. There's been a number of task force and studies done, so there's a good base of information, and that's really what we'll summarize tonight. We will not go through everything in vast detail that I think you've been provided by staff in terms of the history of the studies that have been done at the farmstead, but we'll hit some of the highlights. And then we'll look at potential ways that we can present these options, collect the feedback, and present back to the mayor and city council to provide an actionable master plan for the property. So the property itself, I was shocked again when I look at these dates, 1822, and then I realized it's almost, it's over 200 years old. It's phenomenal history on the site. And 100 years ago, it was the largest and one of the most heavily utilized dairy operations in the country. Just phenomenal history on the site to be celebrated. There's a number of existing buildings that were developed, replaced over the time before it conveyed to the city in 1999. Since the spin under the city's fantastic care, the city has looked at possible uses through a number of sessions and reports. The site was designated as a historic district. There were additional studies done to see with that what that imposed upon the site, and then more recently, 10 years ago, a detailed physical assessment was done of the facilities, and from that, recommendations were put forth, and several construction projects have occurred on the property. Most significantly, structural renovations and facade restoration of the two primary dairy barns in 2018. Currently, if you've driven past the site, you've seen a tremendous amount of housing being built to the north. So King Farm and the neighborhood continues to expand and provides additional opportunities. As part of that project, the city was able to have a parking lot added to the site for the city's use for the property as part of that development. And the city has also completed work on water and electrical infrastructure projects, electrical projects still ongoing, excuse me, showing foresight into developing the properties and getting them better ready for city use. So I will briefly go through proximity, as you are all well aware of the site's location, the northern part of the city. The farmstead is uniquely located within very walkable distances of other key parts of the city, including transit. So what you see is the circles representing there, basically quarter mile and then half mile, which basically is a 5 to 10 minute walk and then a 15-minute walk away from the site. So within a relatively short walk, you are connected to a number of other park spaces and centers throughout King Farm, as well as transit on the other side of 355. As we zoom in closer to the site, you can see its unique makeup. On screen, we've identified the various buildings, existing old growth vegetation and site constraints, the wildly popular community garden on site, as well as some of the other structures that have been improved and are still heavily used, and primarily the hay barn, item 8, which is an open community structure for community picnics and gatherings. The largest structures on the site are of the aforementioned dairy barns, which have been improved upon. And then figure 5 is the other largest building, was the old horse barn. That one is in a slightly different condition that we'll get to later. And then the smaller ancillary buildings, garage, and of course, the main farmstead house itself. It's important to note that the entire property was designated as a historic site. And as part of that, when it was conveyed, there was also a forest conservation easement on the southwestern side of the site. Really no impact to the potential uses, as it's relatively limited on that side. So as we look at the site, most importantly, we have deed and declarations of covenants that were put in place when the property was conveyed to the city. And that primarily is that the site be used for park and recreational use, and that the King Farm Assembly must be invited to participate in any formation of any task force, committees or other groups contemplating development. Important to note that again, the 47 space parking lot was constructed by the developer, but it is intended for the city's use on that site. It's not part of that development. So once again, infrastructure improvements provided to the site ahead of its use. And that, within the district itself, there's development of the additional housing to the north, but even beyond those units currently being built, there is a large number of housing units that have been approved in the planning stage that will be coming online, both market rate and moderately priced dwelling units. So there's still an influx of a continuing growth of density in the area. I'll move into just kind of a brief summary of the individual buildings on the site at this point. So principally, it was the primary farmstead house, the historic house, large 3,400 square foot dwelling. But it is a house. It was divided as such for its use, so it does limit it how it can be used as a series of small rooms. But it is in a relatively good order in terms of structural stability and its envelope. It would need modest improvements depending on its use. Proper AC comes to mind, as well as some other electrical improvements. And then we move into some of the smaller buildings. Unfortunately, these are requiring much more care. There's a series of small buildings starting primarily with a garage, which was a 2-level structure. You can see open bay below. It is in disrepair, to put it mildly. It would need substantial improvement, both structurally and from the envelope, depending on how it was to be used, and then retrofitted with different electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems. Subsequently, the 2 tenant buildings identified on the plan as 6 and 7 are in a similar state. They are standing, but would require a significant improvement depending on their proposed uses. Again, those 2 were smaller tenant buildings, so they were limited inherently by their design and potential use as they were just homes, a series, again, of small rooms. So we move into the larger principal structures, the west and east barn, both comprising of 2 levels of roughly 5,800 square feet and then a slightly smaller footprint above. Those have been structurally stabilized. Water services have been improved to the buildings for sprinkler service, but further improvements would be needed depending on its use in terms of HVAC, probably improved stairways and accessibility to use both levels. But these are by far the buildings in the best condition that have had the most investment from the city over time. The historic horse barn is the other large kind of footprint building on the site at just under 6,000 square feet. Unfortunately, this one has a number of structural deficiencies that present challenges, but it is attractive given the large footprint. But given its historic nature and the structural repairs, it would present potentially a fiscally challenge in terms of its development. So the buildings kind of inherently come in a sense of order of disrepair and which ones are in the best shape versus the least best. So really, the dairy barns are in excellent order at this point, the house kind of second, and then varying degrees of state from there, requiring further investment to bring those buildings up to use. So where we are in the process is that we have spent time working with the city on data collection, going through the number of reports that were presented, previous task force projects, and kind of done all that data collection as well as a current site visits and assessments of those properties. So we currently sit at the point now where we are ready to hear, we've collected the data of what the buildings are and what the site is, and it's now to get input from this body as well as then moving forward to get input from the community. So we stand kind of really at the earliest stage of this project in terms of data collection and now planning to move forward. So it is, as Tara said, we're soliciting input and approval of the process that we're putting forward to develop this. What we envision is that we would go forward from this, formulate strategies for community engagement, have a series of community engagement meetings, refining from broad vision to a filtering of that vision into its different uses, compile that data, come back to this body and report it. So when we talk about community engagement, there is a wealth of systems and processes that can be utilized. And this is an area where we'd certainly solicit input, again, based on things we've heard earlier tonight about how best to engage the community to make sure that we're listening to all parties. So we have, in our practice, used a number of different methodologies, both traditional and non-traditional, in terms of being able to solicit opinions, whether it be listening sessions at a venue, using the excellent Engage Rockville platform for online data collection, but also being on the ground, having events, table information gathering sessions at community events, having smaller focus groups, reaching out to making sure we're doing things that are inclusive again to the broader community as well. And then, meeting again with city agencies and the commissions to again solicit all the opinions from the various groups. What we see kind of going forward, again, kind of in a more focused community engagement, would be that first series of meetings would be information sharing. Going out to the community, explaining that the farmstead has not been forgotten. We are looking at how to improve upon it, and we need everyone's input to do it successfully. So this would be a very broad kind of based vision where, typically what we see going forward is putting together imagery, evocative imagery of what could be done on the site. Examples, not designs, just thoughts, to get community to feedback and respond. And we find they respond typically better to those images and pictures. From there, we can create survey questions. What are your favorite memories of the farm? Why did you choose to come to King Farm? To really start to develop a story and a narrative for how we can capture the cultural and historical significance, but also just what it means to the community. Kind of, again, pull now all of that more emotional data to go with the physical data, and then we go back to kind of develop potential physical solutions for how this could be handled, working in conjunction with the city. At that point, we come back with a number of options. These now would have some thought, some design, some ways that the buildings could take shape, how they could be utilized on the interior, and really start to see how the community responds to those more specific narratives and images. And they're typically refine those into a series of suggestions. At that point, working with some of our other partners to understand cost and economic development opportunities, so that, as they may be, to then be compiled back into a final report, again, back to this group. So after that kind of second engagement and meetings with the Department of Rec and Parks, we kind of summarize all of those different opportunities and challenges, kind of summarize the community feedback to present to city staff and the mayor and council a proposed plan for the property and its use going forward and how that can take shape. With that, I'll turn it back over to Tara for some possible ideas.
Thank you. So the Department of Recreation and Parks has spent some time thinking about this site and potential programs and services that could be offered for the community. So taking into consideration recommendations from previous task forces, some of our indoor program and usage recommendations include offering visual arts classes, possibly a black box theater, creating maker spaces and hobby studios, additional youth and teen programming, possibly developing a community kitchen for culinary experiences, farm to table type experiences, but really trying to develop a space that is intergenerational, where we can attract various ages and abilities to this complex for recreational use. Next slide. We also have thought about, opportunities for children's play areas, preschool opportunities, outdoor recreation areas. As Matt mentioned, there is a very well-loved community garden already on the property. We also talked about possibly incorporating a sculpture garden, right, to support artists and also the community's engagement with art on the property. We have talked about different pop-up shops and farmers markets. If you recall from some of the task force recommendations from both 2001 and from 2017, they were very much interested in having some sort of marketplace available for the community through whether that's an additional farmers market or an arts and crafts type market. We also talked about potentially offering STEAM programming, as well as partnering with some of the other departments in the city to offer community resources, a wellness center, and then of course having some office space for staff and potential storage on the site as well. So those are just some broad ideas that we have talked about. So that actually concludes our presentation, but we want to open it up for the mayor and council if you have any questions before we get into the actual work session for your feedback.
Thank you. First, I want to commend you on a fantastic presentation. I know the department has worked really, really hard on this. I also know we funded this in FY24, so if anyone's asking how we're going to do this study, we have already allocated funding for this study, so I appreciate that. And also thank you to the consultant. I think there's a really nice community outreach process designed. I have just a quick comment on the community outreach. I know that we, by covenant, I believe, need to make sure that we are reaching out to the King Farm community. That's part of what we as a city, as having this property, have agreed to do. I do see this also as a regional center for the city. And so I just also want to make sure we're trying to really get feedback from other parts of the city as well, in addition to the King Farm community. I just wanted to make that broad comment. The other thing I was just curious about is the phasing of this. This is resource and capital improvement intensive. However, as you noted, there have been some buildings that have had more structural work and would require less upfront. And so I just want to say I am open to a phased approach. I know particularly the dairy barns are, sites that we might be able to activate more quickly. There's already been millions of dollars spent on that to shore it up. And what I have concern about is the longer these buildings sit empty, the more work they'll require later. And so I just wanted to make that point of from my perspective, and I look forward to hearing my colleagues' perspective, I am open to a phased approach. I would like to activate the spaces that we have already invested in. I think that the electrical and some of the key things that you need to be able to access water and electricity is critical. And I'm thankful that you're moving forward on that, and that was also already budgeted for. It's not new necessarily. There may be some additional things once you decide the use, but some of that core infrastructure is already budgeted for. I was going to just ask, as we go through the list, maybe you can have them up for my colleagues to weigh in on. I was actually very supportive of these ideas. I'll just note the ones that I didn't quite see spelled out as much. One is, and again, I like these. I'm glad you put youth center on there. I know some of my colleagues and I have been talking about a youth center. The visual arts classes I'm also open to. I just want to make sure we don't overlap so much with Viz Arts and pull away from that. But if there's complementary things, I'm good with that. One thing I didn't see there was the Rockville Ballet. I do know that Rockcrest is in very, very poor shape, and we will need a new space, and that goes in with the activity supporting youth. I think the Dairy Barn might be a good place for that, but I just wanted to flag that. I didn't see that on there, so I wanted to put it on. I absolutely support the garden. I think we need community gardens all across the city. I know we have a few, but I would like to see that expanded. Event space. I know Glenview and F. Scott Fitzgerald, especially weddings, those get booked up quite a bit, and sometimes we have to turn people away. And so it would be cool to have space for sort of a dairy barn wedding, and that actually helps bring in revenue to help support the other programmatic ideas that we want to have happen. And also, I know we have a childcare center in more the southern middle part of Rockville. And I was just thinking there's a gap on that northern part of Rockville. I would also like to see, childcare is a big equity issue. It's a big issue for people trying to find work. And so I do see that as an opportunity to potentially expand childcare and make it affordable. And I'll just pause there because I'm sure there are other things that I don't want to cover all the ideas. I'm sure my colleagues have some similar ones and can add to those. Councilmember Jackson, I know that you're super excited about this topic.
Actually, I am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as you might know or might not know, I'm really enthused about the King Farm farmstead. I live in King Farm. I've been involved with the farmstead for, since I moved there. both having a garden, but also just having my kids grow up, play there, having them at the picnic area. There's a lot of memories and a lot of nostalgia about the farmstead. So I really appreciate you having this presentation and this council having a discussion of what we're going to do with the farmstead. It's been 25, 26 years, and we've batted about various ideas. There have been task force after task force, study after study, and all with good intentions, but for one reason or another, we haven't just pulled the trigger. And I want to thank you for recognizing that there are covenants and restrictions on the property. And I think that the ideas that you've come up with, that all of my colleagues all weigh in on the ideas, but they're fine. I mean, I think that low impact parks and recreation are exactly the way we need to go. And especially because we know that the city has needs that aren't addressed in the current makeup of what we have on structure and everything else, that this property can actually address those needs. And I agree that the dairy barns and the house have the most potential to be used extremely quickly being the next 5 years or so. But yeah, well, past that, I mean, there's the tenant houses, and then there's the horse barn. And the horse barn is going to take a lot of discussion, because I think that it is the structure that's the most in need of discussion about what to do. As you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It was actually recommended, I think, in the 2014 report to be demolished. And it's now 10 years prior, or that report was 10 years prior to now, and nothing has really been done. So it's 10 years older and 10 years more age. So I think that that's going to be a hard topic to have. I did have a couple of questions, if you just indulge me. On the, I think it was page 11 of the report that you just gave. There's a field on the corner of Frederick Road and Picard. And I noticed that you didn't actually have that field listed or any uses for the field. And I just wonder if we could actually look at that field. I think, for at least my perspective, the mayor was talking about weddings or other gatherings, and I think that that's a perfect kind of a field for gatherings, for events like that, if we just decide to use it. But I don't want to let that field get forgotten, because I think it's an excellent parcel of land, and that we really could use it for something. I know that the Rotary Club has a program that they put out flags on Memorial Day. And so I just think that that is a good use, but more could be done with that field. I know that we talked a little bit about the garden, and full disclosure, because we talked about that tonight, I'm a gardener for the Farmstead Garden, and I know that there's a waiting list on the community garden. And with the EYA houses coming online, as well as assisting residents that find out about the garden. And the garden is actually open to all residents of Rockville, not just King Farm. I think the prior body might have been confused about that. But I think that maybe we should look at expanding the garden if there is a desire for that. And I will stop there. I will ask more questions, but I just want to say I'm excited by this discussion, and I'm excited to finally be able to maybe make a decision to move forward. Oh, I have a question about the. I know. I'm sorry. I am so excited.
So excited.
But I actually have a question. When you wrapped it up, You talked about 1 to 3 concepts. So when we talk about a concept, we're not just talking about ideas like what to do with the dairy barn. You're talking about a concept for what to do with the entire campus, if you will. Is that right? Or are you just talking about, hey, we want to use the dairy barn to have a community center?
The specific goal would be to have design concepts for uses of the buildings that would be developed to a level that we could get some level of conceptual pricing, so that the city and council would have a budget to go with the idea.
Okay, no, thank you. That's a perfect answer. And the only other thing is when we are thinking about connecting the King Farm Citizens Assembly and getting their input, there are a lot of apartment buildings and other residences around that are not connected to the King Farm Citizens Assembly. So I would just hope that as we gather community input, they would also go to those residents who are renters or in condos and get their feedback as well. And with that, Madam Mayor, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Just one question. Are you good with the process?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. And I meant to note that yes as well. Councilmember Fulton and then Councilmember Van Grack. And then Councilmember Valeri.
Thank you. I can't claim to be as excited as Councilmember Jackson, but I am excited. I also have to say that I am a fan of the King Farm Garden only because Councilmember Jackson gave me some amazing peppers from there earlier tonight. So. But let me. I do have a couple like threshold questions, maybe for the benefit of the public, but really my benefit before getting into concepts. And I'm only asking because like the old lawyer in me like just wants to know what the guardrails are, not that I want to do any of these things. So first on the historic designation, and Councilmember Jackson just said something that maybe answered this question. Do every single one of those structures need to stay on the property, or is it some of them? Because there was a reference to demolishing one of them. Like so my first question, let's get through them all and you can answer. So that's my first question. Like what are the requirements for keeping and maintaining every individual structure? And then my second question is on the covenant on it being used for parks and recreation. How do we interpret that? What does that mean? Because some of the uses that I'm seeing on there, maybe it's up to interpretation. So like, what are the guardrails based on those two things to help me understand?
Yep. Let me take a stab at both of them, and then if I don't get it exactly right, especially on the second question, I'm sure Robert will jump in on it. So regarding the historic designation, that is a key limiting factor of the development of these buildings, for sure. At the end of the day, we're going to have to prove a couple of different things before we can take down any of those buildings, any of them at all. One is imminent life safety and danger, which I don't think there's any proof of that on the property itself, or significant financial hardship to redevelop the buildings outside of their form with some type of rec and park uses. So I think those are both uphill climbs. So I think our goal is really going to try to do as much preservation of all these existing structures as possible. If it gets to a point where one or more of the structures is in such poor shape with the designated use that the budget is extraordinary, we could petition the Historic Advisory Board to see if they give us some relief there. But again, I think it's an uphill climb. The second answer to the question is the covenants are crystal clear that the principal uses of the site should be rec and park related. I think that's crystal clear. There were some uses that are mentioned today, which I would consider secondary uses, and there's a little bit of art there, but I'm curious what Robert thinks.
So the restrictions, they're really not long. I like to read them to the body. So it says the park site shall be used as a site for a neighborhood park and recreational facility and shall serve the current and future residents of the subject property, which would be the King Farm residential development, and the general public. So that's the first covenant. The second is the grantee, which is the mayor and council, shall, at no expense to the grantor, which is the developer, its assessors are assigned, construct recreational facilities on the park site designed to serve the current and future residents of the subject property and the general public. The development of the recreational facilities constructed on the park site shall be subject to the developer's reasonable review prior to commencement of construction. The parties shall use their best efforts to reach consensus on the design of the recreational facilities. That's two. And the third is the grantor or the developer shall have the right, but not the obligation, to participate as a member of each committee, task force, or other group preparing consideration or evaluating plans for the park facilities. And the grantee, mayor and council, shall promptly advise the developer of the formation of such committee, task force, or other group. Period.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it. I will just things that I like in addition to the community garden, since we're going. The child care center, assuming it comports, I think is a great idea. I know it came up several years ago. Youth center, intergenerational center is also a great idea, as are all of them. But I just wanted to know the boundaries of what's possible going in. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Can I just ask one clarification question from Councilmember Fulton's piece to staff? The horse barn is not necessarily shoring up. In the last body, it was noted to mayor and council that actually it needs to be taken down and rebuilt. So it's not just an effort of, can we put structural reinforcements as we did with the dairy barn? It's like really a reconstruction trying to use the same material. So I just wanted to flag that one additional piece of information given her question.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Van Graff, Councilmember Valeri, and then Councilmember Shaw, and I'll go to Dr. Miles.
So I want to echo my colleagues. First, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this presentation. I think a lot of us have been waiting a long time to see this push forward. I've got parents in King Farm visit the area often, and I think it's important for us to move forward. Often when I've talked about this property, considering it's been going on now for over 20 years, and what we're going to be looking at is, and this is kind of my thoughts on moving forward, is the phrase, perfect is the enemy of the good. We are limited to what we have with regard to this property. And because of the limitations that Councilmember Fulton said, there is no perfect resolution. And there's no perfect use, because recreation and parks isn't necessarily a farm that's a dairy farm and a horse barn. And I noticed that you had as a title to your suggestions, adaptive reuse ideas. My suggestion is, with regard to moving forward, we should think about the use that's most adaptive. As opposed to focusing on one specific area, whether it's areas just for, a market, there's a lot of different things that if you have just a general good space, you can utilize. And I don't want us to be thinking about any specific direct use, whereas there are so many uses the city can get out of if we're doing a general build. For example, we talk about a large area that can be used. I've heard from numerous people. In fact, even Senator Kagan has come to me and other members of the body talking about there's no really good small concert space. Well, if we have an area that can be used as a black box theater, that can be used for a dance group, that can be used as a ballet, and that can also be set up for a small concert space, wow, we've got numerous adaptive use for one area. Similarly, we've got a tremendous programs for classes with regard to the Rockville Rec and Parks. I don't want to limit us by installing necessarily a bunch of stoves when a certain area can be used. If we put it ceramic areas, maybe some temporary things. We've got the Rockville Science Center, which is currently in Rockville Town Center, that's complaining about their specific use there, that potentially being too small and what could be happening around them. We potentially have use, as you talked about, for STEAM that can be used in numerous different ways, not just for the Rockville Science Center, but for classes. I recall when I was a youth in Rockville, going to a number of, through the Rockville Rec and Parks, we were utilizing Julius West Middle School, we were utilizing the senior center. A lot of the uses that we used to be able to utilize, we're not able to use because there's not just general areas for these classes to happen. So again, I don't want the perfect to get away from having a really good development that, to quote Councilmember Jackson, sooner rather than later, we can actually get use. And I don't want the debate to be stemmed on one particular use when we really, I think, and I can speak for myself, and I know what the mayor and Councilmember Jackson was talking about, a general use that can be utilized by the city sooner rather than later. And so that's kind of my general thoughts, because I think there's a lot of, if we just build a good space that can be used, we can utilize it in so many different formats. And importantly, I want to echo, because I've heard this from numerous, aside from hearing from the community talk about, we just need something there that we can use for the community garden is so loved by the community. I can't tell you the number of people that talk about and have communicated with us the love they have for that community garden. And aside from Councilmember Jackson's peppers that I've tasted other community members' fruits and vegetables that are just fantastic. And it's an area that's beloved, and I don't want to get rid of that wonderful use that we already have that's serving the community well in what we're also doing. And I also don't want any construction that I know sometimes can get in the way to temporarily abate the use of that garden, which is used and often has a waiting list even to just get access to.
Thank you. Councilmember Valeri.
Okay, so I have one question and then I have my ideas. And it may be because my eyesight is not the best, but could we get a clearer, more high resolution version of that map that's on slide 11? When you zoom in on it at a certain point, it starts getting really pixelated. So I'm a visual learner. So that would be really helpful as far as kind of, thinking through, or, if people come forward with ideas. I know I'm going to refer to this quite a bit because I was sitting here like staring at it while we were, going through all the different ideas. Okay, so that's that. I think that I love the idea of not having any sort of specific named entities, but I was thinking more of like, this is like the Farmstead Community Campus, and that would be really inclusive and could outline a variety of uses, keeping all of our options open. I am with Councilmember Van Grack. I want it multi-use. I think would be great, but in the order of both need and personal preference upon kind of looking at what the city already has and what we're in need of. One, we are very much in need of a youth space, a youth-specific space. And whether this is the right location, I think that would be something that we need to explore for certain. Two, because I'm not a gardener at this community garden, I am a gardener, and I absolutely love the community garden, and I think we need to keep at a minimum and or expand it as one of the uses, because if there is a wait list, it is that popular, we should be supporting that. And we'll actually go one step further in whatever we do with the farmstead should not, however that goes down, should not have any sort of long-term detrimental effect on the community garden, on the viability of the soil, et cetera. I could talk more about that, but I would bore you. Definitely, I think the fastest use, the folks that could hit the ground running literally, would be the Rockville Ballet. They need a space like yesterday. They have no place to put basic sets and props. And from an equity perspective, the work that they do in the community to make ballet accessible and available to everyone regardless of income level is huge. So I would want to be very supportive of them. And again, if the space is ready, like the dairy barn, if one of those spaces is ready, they could move in tomorrow. So talking about that quick activation. I like the idea of the farmhouse as being the community resource / wellness center. It looked like a very kind of idyllic setting and a comfy space is what I saw there. For certain, support the child care center as one of the options. Again, kind of having the analogous space that there's one in the southern part of the city. It makes sense to have one in the northern. On the field, I'm really glad Councilmember Jackson brought that up. I think any other uses are okay as long as we can still honor the use, like the Memorial Day flags, which the 2 years in a row, I found it extremely moving and very significant, and a lot of people see it too, from the location next to in eye line of 355. So I'm cool with exploring. I just wouldn't want to constrain our ability to do that. Other than that, I'm just really looking forward to the outreach and hearing more distinctly from the community.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw?
I want to echo my colleagues and thank you for the presentation. I do like most of the ideas, particularly the community garden, as my colleagues have shared, as well as expanding the garden, and I like the idea of the community kitchen. And I think one of the ways that we can think about engaging the community and pulling information is also thinking about getting data around food insecurity. Since the community garden does actually, some of the surplus, I believe, goes to some food banks. So just thinking about addressing that need as well. And also, while we are gathering data, whether it's from a survey or what have you, making sure that we are pulling demographic data. So not just having equity as part of our goal, but also part of the process. And so I think it was done well with the budget survey with some of those same questions. So I think that's a really good model to apply. Thank you.
I want to just go to colleagues who haven't spoken yet. Dr. Miles, do you want to ask any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Don't have any questions. Want to echo thanks that you and others have given both the new director and the team that put together this presentation, and largely associate myself with your comments with regard to stage process, looking at uses that are not duplicative, but additory, that add to what we have here, and addressing some of the needs you mentioned, the valet company as well, which I support as well. But that's all. I like what I see thus far, and am excited to both see where we're at and gauge where our colleagues are on this one. That's all.
Thank you. I just have a few things that I held back on, and then I'm going to go to Dr. Giving you another degree, Councilmember Jackson. And I want to say thank you to the comments from my colleagues have been very, very thoughtful and looking at all the possibilities. I'm not going to repeat anything I already said, but we do have a number of nonprofits that Rockville works with, like the performing arts theaters that really try to give people exposure and provide, reasonably cost opportunities for people, whether that's the theater, the musical theater, and there are several others. And I would also say the Science Center would be part of that. The other one I want to mention is the Bike Hub. So they provide free bikes to our residents all the time. I know that they're in temporary space that is not necessarily going to last. And I know we heard during the testimony, that we don't really have a youth education for bike learning. And I actually had a chance to go to the event, and some of my colleagues went there as well. And I was helping someone learn how to ride a bike. I'm not qualified fully. I hope to be, but do have a lot of life experience on that. But that's one of the ones I wanted to mention as well, is just thinking through spaces for our community partners that actually maybe we don't necessarily provide the service, but we're giving them space. We do that model with Viz Arts, for example. So there is some precedence there. So I wanted to at least raise that. We tend to not have enough summer program space. And I've talked about how they sell out like Taylor Swift and Beyonce tickets. It's just first 12 minutes gone from any of the programs. And so I just wanted to see this as an opportunity to also make more space for more children. I know a lot of parents appreciate it, but it also gives healthy activities for our children and also helps keep them out of trouble and get leadership and fund healthy activities. So I wanted to flag that. The other piece is just, I know that the city manager is working on building the JEDI team. And so I just wanted to make sure that we have an interim person assigned to some of those roles, because this requires thinking about equity throughout. And I saw that you made a really good reference to that. So I just wanted to at least flag that for consideration. I also want to acknowledge that many community members have provided feedback thus far as we go through the task force process, and as we continue to link to so that people can see there has been a lot of work and good ideas that have come forth. This is not just another exercise. We're going to build on that. We're actually working on getting it done. I think there's some frustration in the community of another thing that's going to go nowhere. That can't happen this time. We need to get it done. And I'm excited about this council's efforts to get it done. I did want to note one of the only ideas that I wasn't a huge fan of on this list was using storage space and office space for staff. I'm fine with it if it relates to the program activities that we're going to put there. But we've got 6 TAF court. And so I think that is a better use if there's just general staff space. If it's related to the program space, absolutely, I would be fine with that. But I just wanted to flag for me, we do have other best uses of that. And I also wanted to I know you had on here Black Box Theater. I do think, we have the F. Scott Fitzgerald Theater is the only one, but we've been talking about a Black Box Theater for years. And I mentioned the garden, farm to table, and you had community kitchen on there. We had the economic development session last week where there was a discussion on need for commercial space as well. So that could also be a partnership potentially to help people who are looking to start new businesses or thinking about ways to support food insecurity. So those are the additional things on my list that I didn't want to name all up front, just to space it out. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll try to be more specific with my questions rather than gushing again. So I would just add that the history of the farmstead, there actually was a Bikes for the World on the speeds. I believe it was in this Horseborn, and then they moved out because of the state of the Horseborn. So I think that's an excellent idea to add the Rockville Bike Hub or something like that as we think about all the options, just because I think it has a nice tie-in with how it was used previously. I also would echo the mayor on the nonprofits, but actually go a step further. I think maybe adding a nonprofit incubator space would be a good idea. For small nonprofits looking for space, looking to get started, I think that could be an excellent idea for going forward to this body to consider. I think Councilmember Van Grack was really onto something when what he was talking about with the spaces was that they could be multi-use spaces and not just one space. And so I know we talked about the ballet. That was a problem with the prior council, was that they were discussing the ballet, but it wasn't something that could be used for multiple people to do whatever. Gosh, that's not really too expressive, but you get the point. So I just ask, whatever we do has to be adaptive so that people can use it for multiple purposes rather than just one. If we're going to spend a lot of money, we should have to actually make sure that it's multifaceted and not just pigeonholing ourselves. And then finally, the connectivity. And I know that we're talking about how we're going to use the farmstead, but just remember that the connectivity to King Farm is crucial. And right now, we talked about the parking lot that they put in. We talked about the 355. There's going to be access to the campus. There is not really a access to King Farm. There's a gravel road that goes down by the picnic area, down there to the gates. But we should be thinking about how we improve that road to make it more walkable and rollable for people with mobility challenges. I just want to throw that out there so we don't forget that. And then finally, kind of building on that, ADA. I know that we haven't really talked about ADA, but it's going to be really crucial for all the properties, but especially the dairy barns and the farmhouse, because it was obviously built in a time when they didn't have the ADA. They really didn't think about people that were mobility challenged or disabled. So just another thing to think about as we're thinking about the cost and what we can do with the structures. Finally, well, not finally, I have two more things. Has anybody thought, and you probably have, about asbestos? Has any study been done about asbestos, especially in the farmhouse?
We've had a whole report on asbestos, and there's no asbestos on the property.
Perfect.
It's been abated on the site. Thank you, Chris, Henry,
Yes,
very much.
thank you. I couldn't remember that one. Finally, I just had one question, and this is really specific, but I noticed it, and I just want to ask. So, can you explain the impromptu conversations that you want to have on the King Farm shuttle bus?
So that was just another example of outreach, given that it serves the broader community and goes around. The idea that it's just another way to reach folks for announcing community engagement sessions, posting QR codes for this to take the survey, simply another vehicle for messaging. Less so, potentially even, as part of the engagement, you could do interviews or something like that with ridership, but probably more just as another vehicle for outreach.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest like surveys or things that we can have, like the budget survey that we hand out. Maybe that on the shuttle bus rather than spending our time and effort doing impromptu conversations. I don't think we get a lot of bang for our buck that way. But no, I think this was an excellent presentation, and you guys are on the right track in terms of engaging and getting feedback from the broader community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulton and then Councilmember Valeri.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide feedback and be clear based on what I heard from my colleagues. I really like the idea of just build the dang space and build it and they will come kind of a deal. So I'd be interested in, rather than getting particularly specific on oh, I love a hobby studio or I love a whatever, what the experts think is what's the best way to build out these structures in a way that makes the most amenable to whatever it is we need at any given time. There's something really appealing to me about that approach, assuming that there's not a lot of differences in what they need between these different uses. So I really like that approach. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Valeri.
See, I'm just going to contradict Councilmember Fulton because that's what I do in life. No, I'm kidding. No, and I fully appreciate that, and I appreciate Councilmember Jackson. While I remembered the conversation about the ballet uses, maybe not everyone was following that saga. We will just then be continually kicking the can down the road on the space that the Rockville Ballet needs. So either we put a pin in it, we help make that a priority. I think we've been able to do that in terms of other things if that can't work as a use. I always think, new day, new consultant, maybe there is a way to do it. We don't know. And we don't know until we find out. So I'm maybe it's like a combination of Councilmember Fulton and I, where we do have a problem. We do have a recreational need that does not have the home that they can use truly, where people have storage at their home. But I also don't want to constrain use either. So I know I'm not being very clear on this. But something that came into my head, and I think this would help too, is generally, and when the child care center was brought up, it was the idea of here's a city service that's in one part of the city, but for someone who lives in King Farm or in the New Farmstead district or just King Farm writ large, that is a trek to go down to where that child care center is. So it would be helpful, and maybe it would be helpful for the discussion, are there similar city services that are extremely popular that are regularly held in another part of the city that we could look at ease of access for the community in King Farm? I was thinking, summer youth programs where, in the middle of the city and south of it, we look right to our community centers. But I know that King Farm does not have a city-run community center, unless I'm mistaken, Barry. Sorry, Councilmember Jackson. I'm just trying to think of ways of how do we as a city, the use that would best help the King Farm community, and then maybe kind of finding a way to support that, or at least make this a space, to the other points, that those things could be held on this greater campus.
Just wanted to, thank you. I wanted to, maybe staff might have a comment on that, but so I know that the King Farm District will have its own center, and King Farm Civic Association has some facilities for itself, right? But there are other people in the community, whether that's rental apartments, whether that's Ingleside, others that don't necessarily have access to those facilities in the same way. So there may be a potential gap. And I believe there was also discussion of, I don't know if it's Lytle or someone else, is a nearby affordable housing project. And then we also have Bainbridge, that's not that far away. So there are other parts of Rockville in that region that may not have access to the same facilities, and we could help provide and bridge that. So I wanted to just at least note that. I see Councilmember Jackson.
No, I just want to echo your statement. I think there are apartment buildings that don't have meeting spaces. There's the Brain Bridge, and we haven't even talked. I mean, if in the future we annex City North Metro, there's a lot of potential for building there, and that is potential people that could use the space as well as might need meeting space. So I echo your comments.
The last couple questions I'll note. One is, as you go out and get community feedback, I know it's not possible to have everyone go on site. I know there's some safety issues from like the horse barn potentially, right? But I was wondering if maybe there could be some sort of video or something where people can get a feel. I was talking to some folks about what the tenant house looks like, and they're like, I can't even imagine what it's like inside. But I think as you're getting community feedback, if they can see a small snapshot video, that might help bring ideas to life. So I wanted to just recommend that. On the comments of my colleagues on, everything that we do, new rebuilds, has to be ADA compliant. We have to follow the law. I know that the community garden is not yet ADA compliant. So once we start tinkling, there, that we do need to keep that in mind sooner than later for the phasing, at least to access the site. I know the dairy barn has space where elevators can be. I know walking through with the former director had shared that they had a vision of where that could go. So I'm excited about that possibility. The other thing I want to note is on the ballet discussion, it was really pushed towards the horse barn, which was going to cost, it was like 6 million. It was multi-millions to redo. And that was one of the barriers, is one dedicated space that didn't have multifunctional use, whereas the dairy barn has 2 floors and there's 2 sides of it. So there's 4 potential spaces, and there's ways that you can modify the floors so that we're thinking about multi-use. And it's the most structurally sound of the buildings, in addition to the tenant house. But I just wanted to note that there is multi-use possibility there, and provide some context to that discussion. So I know we gave a lot of information to you all. I hope this was helpful, but are there any questions you have for us of things that you want us to knock out or clarify?
Mayor, we agree. It was extremely helpful. We got a page full of notes with lots of dots and check marks. So this is exactly what we were looking for. Hopefully it was beneficial to the council as well.
Thank you. And this will be socialized with the Recreation and Parks
Yes,
Advisory Board
of
and
course.
Foundation.
Yes.
They play a critical role.
Yep, we'll put together a schedule of engagement and how we're going to reach out to all those groups.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
All right. We're almost on time, or about. So we're now moving to mock agenda. I know that we had a LPT Leadership Planning Team meeting this morning and looked at at least the next meeting. So I just wanted to open up and see if there are any additional questions about the next meeting. Okay, seeing none. And I know you'll get back to us on how you may be shifting some things around on the town center planning process. All right. Okay. So we're ready to move to old new business. Anyone have any comments for old new business? Councilmember Valeri.
I was not planning on bringing up anything old or new, but I feel like community forum compels me to say something. And however, the next step in addressing this as the business of the city, I defer to a longer discussion with my colleagues, and however we want to do this, or be more explicit. Because frankly, it was a slanderous assertion that mayor and council do not care about election integrity or the rule of law. I'm only going to speak for myself going forward. I take election law and the protection of our elections seriously. My own career, I worked at one of the country's oldest good government organizations, formed out of Watergate. I take all these issues, accountability, transparency, good governance, seriously. I do not want anyone to think that because something has not happened yesterday or today, that nothing may occur. Nor would I use the lack of action to assert any sort of motive to that. So for myself, I appreciate my colleagues' indulgence, but I felt very much compelled to respond to that particular assertion. I don't know how we're going to move going forward. I'm definitely not trying to make any of my colleagues uncomfortable, but it was enough of an assertion that I felt the need to respond.
Councilmember Shaw.
I just want to clarify around meeting space and rentals. So it is your right as a tenant to be able to organize within the meeting space in your building. But I do think the farmstead could provide additional space, but I just want to make sure tenants know that it is their right to organize within their building.
Thank you. And I'll just note that there are spaces already built out within Rockville, in addition to their buildings, that if they want to meet, that there are possibilities, whether that's a pavilion or there are spaces, for example, within the swim center that can be rented. So I just wanted to note that there are lots of spaces within Rockville to help support our residents for their meetings and events. Thank you. I just want to just echo the comments of both of my colleagues and note that I too take elections very, very seriously. And I would like to make sure that, the BOSC is aware of all of their options. So I'll just leave it there because I know we as mayor and council want to be very careful about weighing in on specifics because we want to make sure that they have the independence they need as well as all of the options that they have available. Thank you. Councilmember Jackson, then Councilmember Van Grack.
Yes, no, I just want to echo the colleague comments of the mayor and council member Valeri. In choosing how to go forward, the integrity of our elections has not been undermined, and I want anybody watching to know that. And I expect the BSE, the Office of the City Attorney, and the Chief Clerk to continue to work together to improve our election laws and ensure that we continue our legacy of safe, secure, and fair elections. And I know every member of this body is committed to that. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Grack.
I just want to be clear that any discussion from this dais, in my opinion, with regard to any election violations in an election that we were a party to is inappropriate from my view. I'm hopeful that we're not going to be getting to that because I think that's inappropriate for us to do. Obviously, we care about election issues, and I think it's clear from the city manager's report that there's a direction to make sure that we have as robust a code as possible. But I think it's inappropriate for this body to specifically address anything with regard to an election violations in an election that we were participants to.
Councilmember Valeri.
I just want to clarify, I was not talking about any specifics. I was talking specifically about what we heard during community forum. That was a characterization of mayor and council. I was speaking on my own behalf, and that is all. I did want to say that, actually, I think everybody forgot during the city manager's report about the RPAC, the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee, walk from the pump house in East Rockville to the vigil in honor of people who have died simply for trying to bike or walk or roll on the streets. Was it 5 o'clock or 5:30? 5:30. It's 5:30. Okay, so it's meeting at 5:30 at the pump house in East Rockville and ends at City Hall, where there will be a candlelight vigil. So if anyone is super cool and up at 10 o'clock watching mayor and council, then you'll hear about it. But it just popped in my head that we forgot to talk about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
So on that note, forgetting to talk about things earlier, I just wanted to mark the 15th anniversary of the Mansfield Casement Health Clinic. They do excellent work. They serve underserved population and give medical care to people that need it. And I think that their work is spectacular. And I just want to congratulate them on 15 years of successfully doing that, and hopefully 15 years more.
100.
100. Well, hopefully we won't have the need for that.
Thank you. I will echo the comments of my colleagues. I've just seen that they've done tremendous work, and I have supported the clinic and other nonprofits in the city. They make such an important contribution to our residents. Government cannot do it all, and what they do is so critical. I also will just note that there is a grant deadline coming up on November 1st, and I believe there's also community matching grants. There's something that's going to come up opening November 4th. City manager is agreeing to that. I will also note that the city manager has a review process where staff make decisions about those grants, not mayor and council specifically, particularly on the caregiver grants from the past. So I just wanted to clarify and clear that up.
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. The other piece I wanted to just note is there were such good ideas included in the budget projects process. Some of them are, bigger projects. Some of them are small public safety issues. Some of them are things the county might be interested in. It's not really in our jurisdiction. And so I was just wondering, beyond just the review of what we're going to fund, not fund, if the relevant departments could see what has been proposed by the community. I've seen things like crosswalks and lighting and, just things that we might be able to look at as part of our standard public safety review process. So I specifically want to call that out. Then there were things like bridges to Park Potomac. Now, Park Potomac is not officially part of the city and within our limits, so there may be areas where we can forward some of the resident requests to the county. So I just wanted to at least acknowledge that so many people provided very, very thoughtful comments, and then see how we can triage some of those in addition to what we do in our standard budget process. I'm seeing a head shaking from the city manager.
Yeah, I agreed. Thank you, Mayor.
And then also, just I feel the need to say this, especially as we have ended Hispanic/Latino Heritage Month, which we celebrate all of our diverse communities all year. But I just noted that the budget survey report doesn't yet include that breakdown, and we will be doing that in the next iteration. I just want to acknowledge myself as someone who works with and is a part of that community, that we want people to feel seen, and I know that you're going to work to address that.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions? Okay. We're only 7 minutes behind, guys. Congratulations. That's because we took a 7-minute break.
I'm telling you.
But thank you. Thank you to staff. I know there was a lot of diversity in the presentations that came forward tonight, and we appreciate all of you. I know it's hard work. So, and thank you to our community. Good night. See you all.
wait, we have
Oh,
to
wait,
move.
I'm going to move it. November 18th is our next meeting, and we'll now entertain a motion to adjourn. November 18th.
Okay.
Yes, it is our next meeting.
Okay. I thought there was something before then. Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure I said that so the public knows when we're meeting again. And part of it is because the elections are coming up. Please get out and vote. Early voting is possible through the 31st. And if you don't get it in by 31st, you can still mail your ballots in, and you'll also have opportunities to go vote in person. So with that, anyone want to adjourn? Councilmember Van Grack?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night. Happy voting, everyone.